Hey guys, how are you doing? This series got a lot of views, but I had already covered all the chapters, so I let a good number of chapters build up before bringing you part 2. I'll leave in the description the exact timestamp where the continuation of the story starts in this video. This is one of those very different series, and I'm sure you've never seen anything like it. I won't be begging for likes right now. I'll leave that for the end. Without any more delay, let's get into the video.
What would you do if the Earth were in a global collapse? The only chance to get out alive would be entering a ship and traveling for 3,000 years frozen to another planet. But when you wake up, the ship is destroyed, and you are the only survivor. And to make things even worse, you land on a planet infested with aliens that want to devour you. I confess that this work got me hooked from beginning to end. If you like science and suspense, you will like this work. It is a bit complex, so much so that I took a while to make the script. So already hit the like button and leave a comment, because it was very hard to bring this video to you. The work begins with the mothership called Atalanta being destroyed. Our protagonist is called Dong, and he was recording a diary. He tells humanity, if it still exists, that the colonizing ship of the Arcadia mission ended up exploding. This mission had the goal of saving humanity by taking it to another planet. However, something happened and it ended up exploding. Planet Earth became uninhabitable, but the reason for that will be told later. With that, several colonization programs were created. The destination was planet Kepler 3265. And the codename for this planet would be Arcadia. But something mysterious ended up happening to the ship that carried a gigantic crew. All the crew members were in hibernation, and the only survivor was our protagonist Dong. The guy didn't know what was going on and was now lost in space. Recording his last message, he hoped his voice would reach Earth. The poor guy had just woken up from a 3,000 years hibernation and didn't understand anything. He even thought that this would be his end because he would be adrift in space. However, he ended up seeing his guitar. Each crew member could take one item, and that was the one he chose. If by any chance this was his end, he would like to spend his last moments with his guitar. His dream of playing in a rock band didn't move forward, and he never imagined that instead of a rock star he would become a man lost in space. There was no air there, so it wouldn't be possible to hear the notes he was playing. But let's be honest, that would be a pretty philosophical ending. When he was about to give up and die in space, he received a warning on his suit. The escape capsule was activated and he could flee to the nearest planet. Luckily, this capsule was coming toward him, and now he wouldn't die floating in space for eternity. The Atalanta escape capsule reaches him and manages to rescue him. He falls hard inside it, and after pulling the lever, he could save himself by landing on the planet just below. This would mean he would give up on his companions. It wasn't certain that they had all lost their lives in the explosion, but he wouldn't take the risk. After pulling the lever, the ejection ship headed toward the planet. This would be the last chance to stay alive. And within moments he managed to land on an alien planet. The ship activated the parachutes and crashed hard on the ground. He needed to scan to know if the air was breathable. After kicking the door a few times, he managed to open it. He was still dizzy from being frozen inside the ship for 3,000 years. But that place looked like a paradise, better than that hell on planet Kepler 3265. Maybe this would be a better destiny for the Arcadia mission. He activates his emergency radio, trying to contact any crew member or some android from the ship. The temperature was 23 degrees and had 12% oxygen level. From afar he saw a person wearing an alien suit. The clothes were very similar to the members of the Atalanta crew, so he imagined it was a companion. But at that moment some slime fell on his visor. It was saliva from a giant alien monster ready to attack him. The claws come at him, and he manages to dodge at the last second. Dong is thrown to the ground. He still wasn't used to the gravity, and now would have to deal with a creature 10 times his size. Logically, he received training to deal with this. After all, this protagonist of ours is an elite soldier, you'll see. The monster had red eyes, and Dong with a small weapon in hand gets ready to counterattack. That little knife didn't seem like it would solve the situation, but it was his only option. He wouldn't stand still waiting for death. Facing this creature head-on would be hard, so he jumps. A smart and strategic fight would be a better option. Since the gravity and air pressure were different, he didn't react fast enough to dodge an attack. With its tail, the creature started tossing him from side to side. In those cases, he would have to try to break free because he could faint. He threw himself from up there and managed to land on top of the creature's head. This guy here is really brave and immediately stabbed the monster with his knife. In all creatures, the weak point was always the eyes, and he knew that's where he had to aim, giving his strongest attack. And that's what he does, and leaves the creature screaming in pain. During the movement, the monster's claws started falling in his direction, and he was crushed by her. His luck was that this spacesuit was resistant. The other soldier was aiming with a weapon, and it was a high-precision rifle. After aiming, he ends up shooting. firing an energy beam that upon hitting the creature causes massive damage, almost enough to eliminate it. And it even seemed like this soldier knew the monster's weak spots. After using the weapon, the soldier charges toward the creature. He goes all in, transforming that rifle into a giant sword. At that exact moment, the monster tries to defend itself. And with the sword in hand, he strikes back. In a precise moment, he manages to split the creature's legs in half. And now with its mouth open, it was the perfect moment to land the final blow. That would be incredible. And when he pulls the trigger, the explosion happens, thus finishing off the monster for good. When it hits the ground, it causes a small earthquake because of how huge the creature was. Seeing that whole scene, our protagonist realized that it was not a crew member from his ship. That was an alien from this planet, so he thanks with his hands raised. He didn't know if this alien would be friendly or aggressive. So he keeps doing a universal peace pose. He even gets rid of the knife, showing he didn't have threatening behavior. The knife falls to the ground, and the soldier speaks in an unknown language. They really did look like human beings. So Dong decides to show his face by opening his visor. It was to send a message that they were similar even though from different planets. At that moment, we already see that the alien is a woman. She had understood the message and also puts away her weapon, and decides to show her face to him. The guy gets apprehensive. And after she removes the helmet, we see that she was a very beautiful alien. I'm telling you, the women in this story are really cute. The author did a great job. This girl had just saved Dong from a giant monster. He didn't know why this girl had done that, and even less why that monster attacked him. The girl was handing him a bottle to drink from. He looks at that container, unsure if it was safe. His suit scans and detects that the temperature is ambient and the atmosphere contains a lot of ethanol, hydrochloric acid, and methanol. The girl draws a water molecule and keeps saying the word Kai, pointing to the drawing in the sand. He quickly understands that she was offering him water. Would it be safe to open his suit quickly to drink it? And during training, he learned he should try speaking English with beings from other planets since it's an easy language. He thanks in English and not in Korean, and introduces himself saying his name was Dong Young-soo. That language was not understood by our dear blue girl, but she quickly starts to understand the words he was saying and begins to repeat them. Another thing he learned was the universal gesture of shaking hands. Right after that, she took him to her car. The beings of this world had advanced technology, and she was carrying that monster in the back of the vehicle. Talking to the girl, he discovered that the planet is called Bumi, and the intelligent creatures living there are called Bumians. The place was very beautiful, and it seemed those Bumians were peaceful and intelligent. Besides, the climate and landscape of the planet were beautiful, but it would be destroyed in 5 years. Our hero had barely left Earth, which was doomed, and already went to another planet that would be destroyed. During the trip with the girl in her car, he started recording a voice message. He was documenting every moment on this new planet, and discovered through her that the remaining time on this place was very short. They go to a tech base and end up parking the car inside. They go up a ramp to the upper compartments. The dialogue between them was difficult, so he didn't understand this whole destruction thing very well. Upon arriving there, the gates open, and inside the base there were giant mushrooms. Mushrooms everywhere. The girl walks over to another platform, and holding something that looked like a phone, she says a few words. Dong was trying to learn that language and kept repeating her words. It seemed the planet had gone through a recent catastrophe, and he was trying to understand what she was saying. After a while, she started cleaning up that monster. The creature's skin was extremely thick and heavy, and inside the creature there were some valuable parts, and others not so much, and even needed to be removed and thrown far away. The mushrooms were carnivorous feeders, and that was new to Dong, who keeps recording everything in his virtual diary. It was the first time he had seen a mushroom feed on monster flesh. Until then, he was just observing and decided to help her. After offering help, she kept pointing to show what he should do. Our protagonist grabs some of the creature's legs, and she thanks him because it was tiring work. After some time, they finished dividing the creature. They had only been together for a few hours, and she was already able to say a few words in English. They both thanked each other for helping one another, but there were no more words they could understand, and it created an awkward moment. She gets off the truck and says she's going to get something. After going to her machine, she starts saying that she would like to learn English. Dong thinks that it is some kind of computer with artificial intelligence. She was learning the human language very quickly, and all that alien equipment catches his attention. On top of the table there were some sculptures made of stone. He thought it was beautiful and asked if she made that by herself. When she noticed he was looking at her sculptures, she got scared, and quickly took them from his hand. In a cute and funny way, she tried to hide them so he wouldn't see. The guy already starts wondering what the problem with that was. And he also noticed that the Bumians were all clumsy and shy. During the course to become a colonizer, he learned that he should try to connect with the natives. And one way to do that was to show a smile. and he even tried to smile by making a scary face, scaring the girl. It seems that being frozen for 3,000 years wasn't very good for his facial nerves. Another tactic was to give a thumbs up, but in some cultures that could be seen as an offense, so another gesture would be to make a heart. But the way we make the heart is symbolic since the organ doesn't have that shape. Even so, he tried, and left the girl surprised, as if she recognized it. Then he made the heart and pointed to her sculpture, signaling that he liked it. The Boomians were quite intelligent, and she immediately offered her little figure to him. And with blushing cheeks she said it was a gift. Those sculptures were called Balaya, and it looked like a little pig. He said that she was very talented, leaving the girl embarrassed. Right after that she pronounced his name. She pointed to her table, showing other sculptures she had made. When she reached the table, she got very excited, and even activated a projected image to show what the creatures look like in real life. At that moment, he realized that Balaya was not the name of the sculpture but rather the animal. And very excited she showed other sculptures and the image of the creatures. Dong recorded everything in his virtual diary because the animals were very different from the ones found on Earth. Meanwhile, she was showing all the sculptures she had made. She was saying many words and he wasn't understanding any of them. And when comparing with the monster that attacked him, he realized they were very different. It seemed that monster wasn't from this planet. She asked why he was thoughtful. And since he knew she liked animals, he decided to show her some pictures. If there's one animal that everyone likes, or at least almost everyone, it's the kitten. And he immediately shows her a photo of his pet. In the course he took for colonizers, it said that he should use English to talk to aliens. And also that he should look for something in common with them to make friends. And that's exactly what he was doing by showing her pictures of animals. The girl had learned the word cute, and so she started repeating it non-stop, saying the cat was cute. She repeated those words like a child, and our hero said he would teach her other words. The guy even felt happy because he had imagined he would be the last surviving person and would have to spend the rest of his life alone. It seems that our protagonist liked the girl so much that he kept showing her videos of his cat. But there was something he liked even more, which was his guitar. And he asked Langit to wait a little because he was going to get something. After so many words he discovered that her name was Langit. After a few seconds he comes back with his guitar and is surprised that it didn't break. He repeats her name, leaving the girl surprised. Speaking in English and very slowly he said that he liked music, and asks if she knows what music is. At that moment he starts playing the guitar. A robot approaches very fast, and keeps repeating Langit's name. The girl turns to the robot, and he was desperate, bringing urgent news, as if something dangerous had happened. Our hero was trying to make a serenade for the girl, but was interrupted. The robot brought the news that her father was poisoned. She was surprised, asking where her father was. Because he was desperate, the little robot couldn't speak properly. And we see that the guy was turning red. Our hero didn't understand this alien language, but he realized it was about someone or a danger called Ingress. Without thinking twice, they run over there. The base was very big and it took a while to reach the place. It seemed that the door could only be opened from the inside because it had a password. Or maybe the door was simply jammed. It seemed that was what she was trying to do. Contact her father, but was not succeeding. After using a lot of strength, the door didn't move even a little. When analyzing with his suit, he noticed that the door's track was broken. Maybe there was a very strong impact on the door for that to happen. And the desperate girl kept trying to open it. Since they were shorter than humans, they didn't have enough strength to do that. The little robot says that it would be impossible to open the door using only hands. And it seems that they had the antidote for the poison, and even decides to hand it to the girl. Dong asks them to step back. The guy was an elite soldier, and his suit was highly technological. With that he managed to break the door, making them enter quickly. The girl's father was lying on the ground very weak with a red body. She screams the name Ingress, and besides turning reddish, he was also releasing pink smoke from his mouth. Next to him were some capsules releasing a reddish liquid. Dong imagines it's some kind of hormone that the Boomians took. She calls the little robot, who goes to her backpack to get another device with a blue liquid. Watching that scene, he imagines the liquid is a stabilizing hormone. She shakes the capsule and places it on her father's belly to release the medicine. The liquid is injected into the body, making him gradually return to his original color, which is light blue. The girl asks if her father is okay and he says yes, but realizes that there is an alien race in his base, and keeps looking at our hero in that flashy outfit. Our hero listens to that conversation between father and daughter without understanding anything. It seemed like he didn't feel safe with Dong. After all, he was the alien race from the point of view of the Boomians. To his surprise, these people had the technology to create robots with artificial intelligence. And the little robot asked him to follow it. These machines had an easier time learning languages. But learning a language from another planet wasn't that easy. It wanted to show something. and starts pointing to the screen saying its name was Haiji. Dong says it's a pleasure to meet him. Instantly Haiji learns to speak English and starts to explain a bit about the planet. He was pointing with his arms to some images. This planet was called Bumi, and up to that point our hero already knew. Then explains that the planet will be destroyed in about 5 years. The star they orbit is called Painon, but the robot's English wasn't that good, and it was a bit hard to understand what it was trying to say. And after some time explaining, he understood that there is a meteor called Ragbat, and this meteor has some connection to the destruction of the people. He imagines that this meteor is what will destroy the planet. The girl shows up with her father, who was already healthy. The little robot explains to the man that the alien is named Dong. The man introduces himself as Ingress. This story about the meteor really catches his attention. So he asks if what the robot was saying was true. The man explains with a little difficulty that the meteor fell on this planet. The explosion was gigantic, and at that moment our protagonist gets even more confused. It was hard to understand if the meteor had already fallen, or if it was still going to fall. The girl hands him his guitar. The robot realized that the human wasn't understanding. It kept drawing a circle as if it were the orbit of planet Bumi around the star. This planet took 1 cycle to complete its orbit. In other words, they had 5 years of life because that was the time left before the meteor impact. The meteor would fall on planet Bumi and everyone would be destroyed. The guy was already desperate because now he understood exactly what they were trying to say to him. Dong had just escaped Earth, survived an explosion on his ship, and now landed on a planet that would also be destroyed. In the end, it might have been better to stay on Earth. The scene shifts to a character waking up very confused. A robot appears telling him to grab his belongings, as that would help recover his memory. He didn't understand anything where he was or who he was. With that guitar in hand, he wonders why he was there. Strangely, he could play the notes with precision. The only thing he remembered was the music he used to play. He started remembering playing the guitar alone at the Houston Space Base. His friend was named Dean, and he had the dream of playing in a band. His friend sang along with him, and they streamed it online. The guy's dream was to play in a band for 100,000 people, and every time he dreamed of that he felt happy. The robot returns asking him to say his name, rank, position, and mission. This was our hero, Dong Youngsu, chief of the maintenance section of the Atalanta ship. The robot recognizes the name and mission and asks for the designated code. He spells the word Rockstar, and we return to the present with him remembering that scene. His mission was to keep the ship safe and protect the members of his team. But he failed in both missions because the ship was destroyed and his companions are missing. However, the ship was too big to be completely destroyed, and it could be the key to saving those people. So he says with full confidence that he won't let the Boomas die. This story is about to get even more intriguing, so go ahead and leave a like and a comment. When I was reading this, I couldn't stop theorizing about what happened to the ship and where his companions were. Our hero had an idea to save these people. He started searching through some books he had in his bag. The robot starts reading all that information to learn more about the human language. What he really wanted was a book about the ship. The robot had found some interesting information. There were some letters with images, and he teaches the robot a few words. And everything that was said, that machine stored in its memory. The Boomians watched apprehensively because this human could be the key to saving them. And while everyone was anxious, the robot was learning to read. It would be important to teach the robot to speak English, to communicate better with the Boomians. And so he starts repeating the words and making gestures. Also, the robot could understand perfectly. And within a few moments, the little robot says it has learned, and starts reading the content of the book. Hiji was very smart, and begins flipping through quickly to read all the remaining content. Our hero watches without saying anything, and within a few seconds, he had read all the pages. Now speaking perfect English, he says he understood all the human grammar structure, so Dong says he can explain properly, and says he knows a way to destroy the meteor. He couldn't pilot the ship to flee far away, but the ship could cause an explosion. If they could locate the ship, they could throw it against the meteor. The girl's father was listening to everything, and the robot says that Ingress is curious to know about this method. With a chemistry book in hand, he decides to explain. It would be a bit complicated to go over all the physics basics with them. So he looks for the periodic table and explains how the elements work, and next he explains everything in detail to the little robot. It would be important for him to learn about that. And lastly, the most important piece would be oxygen. 2 hydrogen molecules and 1 oxygen molecule formed water, and the robot says it knows that. The guy is surprised because it seemed the people of that planet already had chemistry knowledge. But there was something called Appleton that humans had discovered. The little robot gets curious and starts reading that information. That was the famous dark matter. This substance could not be observed with light and only reacted to gravity. This fact makes the robot curious, It didn't matter if they didn't understand what dark matter was. What mattered was that they could use it to save the planet. It's going to be a flashback to before the space mission, with them discovering how to use dark matter. Some scientists were observing the explanation. With this new discovery, intergalactic travel would be possible. The biggest problem for these trips was fuel. However, space was full of dark matter, so they would be able to refuel the ship during the journey. They even show a prototype of an engine that used dark matter. That was just the initial project, but it already gave them an idea of how it would work. The maintenance chief was Dong, our hero. After greeting the engineer, they move on to the next part of the explanation. The students were learning about these concepts to become colonizers. That was the symbol of the Atalana, the ship that would save humanity. To become colonizers, they would need to follow strict rules. The guy asks what missions were written in that notebook, and the guy explains it's a sequence for the ship's self-destruction. This information scares the guy. That ship had an antimatter bomb more powerful than all the bombs on Earth. That's because Arcadia was a planet similar to Earth and could have intelligent civilization there. Maybe they evolved in the same way some scientists believe humans evolved, and if by chance they posed a threat to humans, they would explode the ship on the planet. That would be necessary to ensure that humans wouldn't be hunted by those aliens. Dong's mission was exactly that. If the aliens posed a threat, he could use the ship to blow everything up. The little robot gets scared, saying it would be dangerous. But the man, who also seemed to be a scientist, sees a glimmer of hope in it. Contradicting Ingress, Hiji thinks the human is not trustworthy, and hears the little robot speaking in the alien language, something that suggests Dong could be evil. This really was a scary idea, so they start discussing whether it was a good plan. After all, it could be our hero tricking them just to help find his ship, and in the end want to blow up the entire planet Boomy. However, they think for a bit and decide what they would do. Our protagonist confirms by saying he would like to find the ship's engine together with them. The group asks why Dong gave them this information. Because he would need allies, so he decided to tell the truth. He wanted to use the power that humanity possesses, and he would do that to save Boomy. He extended his hand and said that if they accepted a deal, they should shake hands. Logically, they were suspicious of the guy, but in the end they shake his hand, because they had no other choice but to believe him. It would be a risky mission because the ship was in space around the planet. Everyone holds his hand. It would be a difficult mission, but they would need to believe. The little robot says it didn't understand the man's last words because they weren't in the dictionary. He repeats saying he would do everything to save the planet Boomy. It seems that this was just a test by the robot to see if the guy was lying or not. And so the little robot agrees to help, placing its little hand. The first mission would be to track the ship, and then find a way to reach it. The scene flashes back to when they were receiving training and the doctor said the trip would last 3,000 years. The students were paying attention because this mission was super important. When they arrive on the other planet, maybe humans on Earth will already be extinct. And if they are still alive, they won't have the technology they have today. It was super important that the humans sent there were trained because they would be the hope of humanity. And with the book in hand, he said that everything they need to learn is recorded there. Our hero was rereading that book and writing down important information. It was as if that training had happened just a few days ago. Everything was still fresh in his mind and he knew he would need to modify his suit. Ingress was a mechanical scientist and could make the necessary modifications. This suit was made for space and not for resistance combat. Besides, his body was not adapted to the planet, so the suit would need powerful batteries. For that, they would explore planet Boomy in search of technology to find the ship in space. The little robot suggests attaching a respirator directly to the helmet. Besides, this modified helmet would make it easier to use the Boomian weapons. The scientist said it would be possible but wanted to analyze it better. That helmet had communication functions. It was a part that would no longer be used, so they could remove it. The suit also contained water tanks to regulate temperature. If he spent too much time without the suit, he felt a buzzing in his ear. That was because he still wasn't adapted to the atmospheric pressure. This large pressure difference caused dizziness and nausea. If he were exposed long-term, it would have bad consequences. By removing the backpack cover of the suit, they see the oxygen tank. It would be possible to keep reusing the planet's oxygen to fill the tank. But for that, some changes would be necessary. In the meantime, he would use a temporary respirator. The next step would be to find a base with better equipment to locate the lost ship. In the meantime, he would need to keep doing physical exercise. Being hibernated frozen in the ship for so long left his body weak. Besides, this planet only had mushrooms for him to eat. It was okay to eat those mushrooms, but they weren't very nutritious. Ingress said they could be dangerous if not properly prepared. So he boiled them and then steamed them. They were already used to eating only mushrooms, and maybe that's why their bodies were weak. Anyway, he would need to worry about his long-term health. Besides training, he should look for other sources of protein. The biggest enemy so far was that monster they call Garita. They ended up on this planet through meteors that fell a few decades ago. He had already noticed they weren't native creatures of this planet. The robot explains that those monsters fought the Boomians and they ended up losing the war. With that, those creatures multiplied and took over the planet. Since it would be a threat, Dong asked the robot to teach how to defeat the Garitas. First, he would need to destroy the vital organs, like the brain, the heart, or the lungs. However, they were similar to vertebrates and were resistant. The robot confirmed, saying their shells are very strong, so they should use the Boomian weapons. The weapon called Naga was like an electromagnetic spear that unleashed lightning. It wasn't very hard to use and Dong had military training. The real problem was when those monsters attacked up close. Langit would help him train in hand-to-hand combat. For that, she puts on a respirator, and upon inhaling that gas, her body starts turning red. Our protagonist's suspicions were right. The Boomians inhaled hormones to become powerful. The Naga weapon could fire 4 times in a row and also turned into a sword. When it became a melee weapon, it could be used for attack and defense. When the attack came from above, she showed the posture he should take. And look how muscular this girl is. Tell me you wouldn't want a juice like that. The robot explains that the weapon should be used with the correct angles. If the attack comes from above, you should point the blade upward. But if the attack comes from below, you should lower the blade. The girl then calls Dong for a training session. He starts mimicking the movements. Then she ends up hitting his weapon and he blocks it. The pressure he felt from that blow was gigantic. In a real situation, he would need to act quickly. And after understanding, he asks if he can also try. In a combat pose ready for the duel, she says he could go all in. And now the training would get serious. The girl charges with the blade in hand, and the robot is afraid they might get hurt. She tries to attack from the side, and he blocks with the weapon. Since she had used that hormone, her attacks were like the charge of a rhinoceros. She wasn't going to go easy. Later, he writes in his virtual diary, saying that the Boomians became stronger when they used stimulants for combat. One of the sections in his daily log, he reserved to record his songs. According to him, this was important because even on the golden record taken on the Voyager, they recorded music. For those who don't know, that gold record contained music and literature representing Earth. But unlike that record, which contained classical music, our hero was recording rock songs. That would be important if one day he died, there would be some record of who he was. The girl watches from afar while he plays. It seems that on the planet of the Boomias, there was no such instrument called a guitar. After all, she was very curious. After he finishes playing, she says she has something important to say. The spacesuit was ready with the modifications he wanted, so they go over there. Our hero was anxious, and the scientist said it took a lot of work, but he finally succeeded. He had managed to improve the suit for combat missions. His device starts updating the modifications to the suit. The engine of his suit was functioning, and with that, he goes in to do the initial tests. Just by feeling the movement, he realizes he was stronger. After entering, Ingress makes the final repairs. Gradually, the suit begins adapting to the body. Now it was more resistant and had considerably greater strength. The man asks him to put on the helmet to breathe better. Our hero was looking like Iron Man. It was no longer that acrylic helmet. This new armor could withstand attacks from alien creatures. They go outside to run some tests, and after spotting a group of monsters, he prepares to shoot. The Garitas were monsters that moved in packs, so he would need to shoot quickly. The weapon could fire 4 shots, but he would need only 3. The girl was watching from afar to provide support. His hand was stable thanks to the armor, and after aiming well, he prepares to fire. The scene cuts to a few hours earlier when the scientist was explaining the plan. He said there were some bases in this region to track the ship in space. The first radar base was to the south. It was located on the coast and a bit difficult to access, but it could make contact with a satellite. If they wanted more information, they would need to go to the other base to the north. This satellite communication base was located on a mountain with difficult access. If the satellites tracked the Atalante ship, the information would be stored there. But first, he thought it better to go to the coastal base because it could have important resources. On the way to the radar base, he wanted to search for debris from the ship. That's because they could find useful items in the wreckage. This makes the girl curious to know what kind of items humans have. He replies saying they might find weapons, food, and seeds. It seems she had never heard of seeds, but then she understands what the word means and asks if there were cat seeds. The robot gives the last bits of information they would need to know. The girl says she already loaded the car with supplies since the trip would be long. They also took some medicine in case they got injured. And before leaving, the robot wishes good luck to everyone. Lanjit was confident, and her father says the mission will be a success. They just needed to follow all the steps correctly. And so we return to that moment when he was preparing to shoot the monsters. He ends up firing a shot, and a laser beam is released from the weapon toward the creatures. The blast hits the alien's head directly, causing a lot of damage. They start screaming and calling for reinforcements. And shortly after, they go into hand-to-hand combat. He had prepared for this and was wearing a special suit. Even with armor, the fight would be difficult. Since there were only 2 monsters, he could use this battle as a strength test. He would need to wait a few more moments. And when the right moment came, the man told his daughter to shoot. She was in the perfect position. Then they managed to shoot 2 monsters in front, hitting them directly. Leaving only 1 alien for Dong to defeat. If the attack came from above, he would have to block from above, but if the blow came from below, he would have to lower the weapon. The girl was tense, worried about Dong. Then she decides to intervene to help him since he was a rookie. She comes down the flowered mountain to fight the creature, and without much difficulty, she manages to split that monster in half. The girl was very skilled, and after defeating the monster, she takes a deep breath. Poor Dong wanted to test the armor but didn't get the chance. He even said it was supposed to be his test fight, and she makes a mischievous face like she couldn't resist the battle impulse. Even the girl's father scolds her, saying it was meant for the rookie. She had good intentions but ended up overriding her father, who was the team leader, so she apologized. Next, the scientist tells Dong to search for the wreckage of the ship. With that, he would go ahead to scan the terrain. He knew the guys sent him ahead to keep catching the daughter's attention. After walking a few meters, he reached the boxes that fell from his ship. It was a large storage compartment for personal items. The black box should be floating in the air holding important information. With the upgraded suit, he begins to climb the compartments. There was a voice recording mechanism there, and he breaks the protective security glass. He decides to remove the case from the black box and listen to the final recordings from the moment of the crash. The ultimate goal of the mission was the safety of the colonists. He listens to the final recording of his friend Dean, saying that Chief Dong would not survive the crash landing. He realized that this was his friend's voice, recorded into Alexia, the ship's operating system. With that, he concludes that he only survived the explosion because of his friend. He kept repeating the safety protocol to Alexia, and asked the ship to eject a safety capsule for his friend, who was drifting in space. No matter what happened, the ship had to save Dong. Our hero saw that it was thanks to his friend that he survived, and wonders how far he made it in the ship and whether he is still alive. He probably also ejected the ship's supply section so it would fall on the planet. He knew that would be important for Dong. The girl down below asks if he needs help, and our protagonist says he doesn't and tells her to stay down there holding the things he was going to throw. Next, he throws down some boxes. There were important items there that would be necessary, and this other box with his hands would be useful to see what happened to the ship. He had also brought a friend's diary, which brought him old memories. While he would analyze the items, he asks the girl to rest. And so he starts reading that diary. There was a lot written, and he gets emotional reading it. We see a flashback of when he was receiving training for the trip on the Atalanta ship. Someone calls his name. It was a superior, so he makes a respectful gesture. This was the day he would pass the interview to become a colonist. The girl appears behind him and asks what our protagonist was reading. He explains that it's the diary of a teammate from the Arcadia mission. At the time, his friend didn't know he was a major, and if he had told him, he wouldn't have acted so rudely. Of course, the girl didn't understand anything because she didn't know the meaning of those ranks. She asks if after he finishes reading, she could look at it too, and he said yes. The scene returns to that flashback, where he was greeting one of his superiors. The man says this is Lieutenant Dong, and introduces himself as Alex, saying he saw him training at the Space Exploration Headquarters. But before that, they would do an interview with our protagonist. He says he is a logistics officer and greets them. But they couldn't waste time, and they immediately ask why he enlisted to be a colonist, and ask if his answer is that he would like to protect his own citizens. Our protagonist confirms yes, because that's what he wrote in the report, and that he was also excited to explore an alien planet. All of that was true, but the officer thought he had used artificial intelligence to answer the questionnaire, and even says that this is unacceptable. Besides, they would evaluate his psychological state. Since he was a soldier, the country was aware of his contributions, but even so, the work of a space colonizer was something serious. Not just anyone would pass these tests. Dong had a not-so-good history in adolescence, so he ended up making several mistakes but turned things around. The officer was reading in the report some information and assumed the boy only wanted the mission because of the money left to his family. In response, our protagonist said that was one of the reasons. And with a suspicious look, the man asks if he has any idea how serious this mission is. He was in debt with college, and his mother had health problems, so he really needed the money. And in the report it said that in the past he hung out with delinquent youths to make money. Dong asks how they knew that information. That's because they conducted interviews with people around the participant. The protagonist confirms yes, but says he never committed theft or anything. He only sold electronic devices. And after he went to live with another family, he stopped those activities. In the report it said that he met a streamer girl and got involved with her. And then they start talking about him serving in the army in some battles. They make some compliments saying he proved to be a great soldier even being young, and asked the boy to talk about his combat experience. Then he explains some missions he ended up doing. He even took part in missions for space catastrophes, like meteor falls. Besides, he acted under high pressure in a combat zone. The officer says he heard very good things about him in that aspect. It seemed the boy really was an elite soldier and never failed to complete a mission with excellence. In response, he says he's used to facing big challenges since childhood. The old man asks if he likes challenges to try to escape the trauma he suffered as a child. He finds that a bit strange, and the old man continues saying this boy seems lucky for escaping all the misfortunes of his life. When his parents died, he managed to enlist in the army, and when his companions died in battle, he was the only survivor. And now that Earth was doomed, he also wanted to survive by leaving in a spaceship. The boy says there were moments he really wanted to give up. But anyway, he always had two options, give up or keep fighting. And even going through hardship, he understood that continuing to fight was the best option. The old man mentions that the beneficiary of the pension is registered in the name of that streamer. And to finish the interview, he should fill out her contact information again. All the information obtained on this mission was top secret. After signing, he asks the officer if he had passed the interview. The guy puts his hand on his face and says that's not a question one should ask, and then hands over a booklet of the top secret Atalanta project. The codename of this alien planet exploration was Mission Arcadia. He should read this entire booklet by tomorrow morning. The position he will hold will be Chief of Section 1 of Maintenance, and upon arriving at the base he will be promoted to the rank of Major. But until he boards the ship, he will be a simple candidate and student. The boy, without showing much emotion, says he's surprised to have passed the interview. The scientist warns that most of the trip they will spend hibernating, which will last about 3,000 years. Combat experience was a huge advantage for him to get into the project. He could also choose one belonging to take on the mission. And when they say goodbye, they wish everything goes well and that they survive. And he still asks if by any chance the boy drinks. He said he stopped drinking a long time ago. And the old man says he should enjoy and have one last meal before they depart. They say goodbye already thinking that this mission is high risk. Someone else calls his name and says they will guide him to the accommodation. And in this way he goes there. The place was a bit far, and the soldier ends up offering him something. But our protagonist does not accept, and says it's alright, that's because this could be his last cigarette. And that after entering the accommodation he will never be able to smoke again. So the boy ends up deciding to try it, and lights it with a lighter. Outside it was very cold. At no moment did he regret this decision. The plane was waiting for them, and he quickly gets there. Upon entering the aircraft he noticed that his items were already inside. The only thing he decided to bring was his guitar. A guy asks if by chance Dong was a musician. With a bored face he said no, and it was at that moment that he met his friend Dean, who was the maintenance chief, and comments that they are both lieutenants. Actually, our hero was his superior. Outside there was a sign saying that this area was top secret. They arrive at the accommodation. Everyone was anxious for the training. Our hero was the maintenance chief of Team 1. And at that moment Dean saw the badge on his shoulder, and felt embarrassed because he didn't know that his new friend was his superior. Outside it was really cold. A giraffe appears, and she starts eating some grass. Don't ask me why there's a giraffe in the middle of the city under a snowstorm, but she was there cold and eating. Several rockets were being prepared for the mission that would take place in a few weeks. Meanwhile, the crew members were receiving training. Our protagonist drops the box on the table, and his new friend was still feeling awkward. He introduces himself to everyone, and says they will receive some items to read. Asks everyone to raise their hand if they had not received it. And so he starts distributing. And those who received it would lower their hand. Dean goes to our protagonist, and asks if it was him on the plane earlier. Dong says yes, and asks if the guy can help him with the distribution of the spreadsheets. Quickly the guy offers to help. A guy at the back keeps yelling that he hasn't received it yet. After a few minutes, 32 people ended up receiving the items. And so the training for the exploration of an alien planet would begin. This would be a top secret training, and no other person in the world would know about this mission. As some people know, the world is in collapse. And if information about this space exploration leaks, the CIA would investigate them. And not even the United States government knew about this mission. Earth collapsed due to a climate crisis. Tomorrow there would be a written test based on the booklet they received. And they would also do some medical exams, so they should fast. and the main training would start right after breakfast. The first training would be physical conditioning. Since hibernation would wear down the body a lot, they needed to be prepared. Increasing the concentration of muscle and fat mass would be useful for survival on the ship. With that, he starts training with his friend. After one exercise, he says it's time for theoretical classes. But the guy tells Dong he's missing one set, but our hero keeps saying he's done. That's because he didn't want to do leg training. And his friend even gets mad saying he can't skip those exercises. After the test, he congratulates everyone saying they did well. The theoretical classes would take place next, and he would have to participate in those as a student. The test was difficult, so he looks for his friend, and starts asking for the test answer. His doubt was about the answer to question 3. The guy keeps telling him to face forward, but Dong doesn't understand the gesture, and the teacher was in front of him seeing that the boy wanted to cheat. After the theoretical classes came the practical training again. They would train mechanics on a real model prototype of the ship. In these missions, since the journey would last many years, the ship could break down. So it was important that every crew member knew how to do maintenance. Besides, they would learn gardening to grow potatoes and beans. Those were very nutritious foods that would be useful in space. And they start learning all those skills. It would be nice if there was coffee in space, and his friend asks if by any chance he wants to open a space cafe. They had already learned many skills to carry out the mission. Finally, they were testing the space suits. The suit had an exoskeleton that could be used to give more strength. It was like the suit was a superhero costume, he explains. After that, they did combat training. This training would be super important because they might encounter powerful aliens. And he keeps trying to scare his students talking about the creatures. Many of them didn't believe in life beyond Earth. But that was something they would check when they got there. The officer was analyzing everyone during training, and makes some notes and jokes saying that Laika would do better than them. It seems our protagonist didn't know that name. That was a Soviet dog who traveled to space. And the guy gets angry saying they are being compared to a dog. After doing all the training, they would learn about how hibernation worked. And they watched some detailed video about the process. This would be important because the trip would last 3,000 years. An artificial intelligence robot was programmed to help them. This was Alex version number 1. Our protagonist explains to the students that this robot will help during the trip. Besides, each one would receive a cell phone to be able to use. The students go there to receive the device. And his friend starts helping with the tasks. A boy appears and says his name is Chase. He had served in the Navy. And this other girl was called Joyce and said she also likes coffee and heard them talking about it. The robot said it will guide her to the cafeteria to try a drink. The poor girl just wanted to chat with our hero, but the robot ruined everything. Dean apologizes for not recognizing Dong on the plane, and our hero, being a good guy, said it was all right. The guy extends his hand to greet him, and says he will support him as much as possible in this mission to make it succeed. And we see how their friendship started. Thanks to this strong friendship, our protagonist managed to survive. And he reads all this information in his friend's diary. He spent a few hours reading and felt sad. Langat was sleeping next to him, and the girl's father asks why she was outside. The poor girl fell asleep next to our hero because she liked his company. The scientist goes there and asks if they managed to find some interesting items. He said yes, and that tomorrow there would be the best part, and they should take the rest of the night to rest. The girl gets in the back of the car and keeps remembering her friend, because thanks to him, Dong managed to survive. That was quite sad. A balloon was being lifted. The little robot was trying to contact someone, and the girl managed to answer the robot's call. She was on watch. That's why she woke up early and said she would look for her father. It seems the robot had discovered something, and she warns everyone. But the robot gets sad because it would like Dong to wake up too. So they end up shouting to wake him up. The guy jumps out of bed saying he got scared. Now that everyone was up, the robot was going to start a quiz. Langat would be the first to answer the questions in English. She gets very excited playing answering the questions. Meanwhile, the girl's father tells her to focus on the mission. The next to answer the questions would be Dong, but he wasn't paying much attention and couldn't know the answer. He said he was half asleep, and that's why he didn't understand. Our protagonist's disinterest made the robot a little sad, so he kept answering random things. And then said he gave up on the game. He doesn't function well when waking up early in the morning. Sounds like you there who procrastinates waking up to go to school or work. He had called himself fool, and the robot asked what that word meant. The scientist tells the human to sleep a bit and rest. Later, the balloon starts to deflate and loses altitude. They were using that balloon to try to communicate with some base. The protagonist asked the scientist when they will arrive at their destination. The girl discovered the word fool and called him that. Clearly she didn't know what that word meant, so she kept repeating it. Ingris said they would arrive at sunset today, so they should hurry. Since the girl was calling him fool, he kept repeating that word. She was finding it very funny and started laughing like a child. But they needed to hurry and take down the balloon. So our hero goes there to help her. If they arrive too late, it could end up attracting monsters. That's why they depart to the destination. The girl kept watching the landscape outside. Since she was born, she hadn't traveled the whole planet but was locked in this region. Inside the supply boxes there was a human weapon. The scientist asks what kind of weapons those are. He explains that they are in good condition and shoot lasers, but are not loaded. One doubt is if those lasers would be able to defeat the monsters. Dong explains that they are similar to the Boomian's weapons, but these have smaller caliber with faster shots. Besides, there were plasma cutters that cut metal, which makes Ingress excited. He even starts laughing, planning some modifications to make on the weapons. He notices a manga in one of the supply boxes. It was written in Japanese and he didn't understand it perfectly. But those drawings caught the girl's attention, since she was spying on him. Dong asked if she wants to read the book later. That was a school story manga, and he explained to her that it was a language he didn't master much. Unlike this planet, on Earth there were many languages in different regions. This story, for example, was in a language different from the English they were speaking. She got interested because the story took place in a school. He explained that school is a place where young people go to learn, and asked if on this planet they also have that. The girl explains that she learned only with her father and with the robot because she lived her whole life inside the bunker. But just by looking at those illustrations in the book, she feels like studying like the people on Earth. She couldn't understand the writings but could interpret the images. Our protagonist even remembers the time when he was young and had a lot of fun. And he keeps trying to imagine how Langit would be if she were a student. Since the girl was very intelligent, he already imagined her as a nerd, saying she had no time to date. Or else she could very well be a delinquent, since the girl was strong. No matter how she was, he knew he would get along well with her. In his curiosity, he wanted to know if Dong also went to school, and if he found it fun. He said he went to school, and he remembered the time when he studied and suffered bullying. He was a bit chubby and ended up getting beaten. One day he decided to help a person who had been hurt. It was an older guy and he was feeling a lot of pain. Even so, our protagonist was there to help him. True, an explosion happened, and he saw that streamer girl, who later got involved with him. There were many memories in his mind. Next we see him in a cemetery. He had lost someone important, and that's why he was very sad. All this happened while he was still a teenager and at school. Because he was sad, the girl concluded that school is not as fun as she imagined. The guy calls her saying he has something interesting, and shows a page of the manga saying that child looks like her. That's because the manga character liked cats just like Langit. The character's name was Amani, and meant sound of the sky, just like the girl's name. She asks him to read the story to her later, and he said he could do that. The girl thought the story about kittens was cool, and ends up taking from her backpack a sculpture of a cat she made. With that sculpture in hand, he comments that it was cute, but he hadn't understood it was a cat, and she laughs at his face. Later they arrive near the military base. The place was hard to access, and they watch from afar. The air defense base was on an island, but to get there was not so simple. He would have to cross a bridge, but it was broken. The original path was submerged by water. That's because at dawn the tide would recede, making the path visible. That's why they would wait and do maintenance until the right time. Dong wanted to know why that bridge was destroyed. The scientist says it was probably because of a meteor. The meteor destruction system was deactivated. Fortunately, the emergency power was still working. This meant they could use the reconnaissance radar. Remembering that they needed to track where the ship was to go to it, they ascend the communication balloon, and the scientist said it was time to report to that little robot at their base about the mission's progress. The girl makes the call and asks if he was listening, and said they managed to arrive at the location. The robot asks about the situation of the base, and she explains about being outside waiting for daybreak. He asked if there was nobody at the place and warns that the former commander was named Paraka. Even if nobody was there, the robot Heiji warns to be careful. They still had a lot of energy and would keep searching at dawn. She asks her father if he felt any trace of the Guritas. He says no, but near the base he could feel that there were some monsters. It was as if those creatures exhaled a scent that was slightly perceptible. The day finally dawns. It was cloudy and raining, but they would need to continue with the mission. Suddenly the weather changed, getting dark. The rain then caused storms. They were at a lookout near the base that was on an island. The scientist begins to explain the plan, saying they were very close to the base. When the tide went down, they could go around toward the island. But they should be careful because the creatures appeared when the tide lowered. He explains he could smell the creatures even if faintly. And about creatures inside the base he wouldn't know. But one thing was certain, they would have to fight to get there. The girl finds something. It seemed to be combat-related objects. These were Boomian's items, and her father said they brought memories of the past. The warehouse was messy and she could smell the creatures inside. They could be pups of the Guritas. Some similar species. And to reassure them, the scientist says to stay calm because they were no longer in that warehouse. Before anything, they decide to eat to prepare, but Ingress tells Dong he would need to moisten that food bar. And so they prepare for the mission the next day. It was delicious to eat something different from mushrooms. That protein bar gave a lot of sustenance. The scientist says to rest well because tomorrow the mission will be difficult. And they should hope it's not raining. But the rain had not stopped. They couldn't postpone one more day, and that's why they were preparing. They brought the most effective weapons to defeat the monsters. The girl's father tells everyone to get in the car because they would depart. And so they head toward the island. The tide had gone down and it was possible to cross by walking. Those creatures were sneaky and they would need to stay alert. The biggest concern was the bridge collapsing while they passed under it. Since it was raining, it was harder to smell the creatures' pheromones. Langat notices an obstacle ahead. The stones had collapsed, blocking the path. They would have to clear the way because outside the mud would trap the car. So they go there to break the stones and start hitting with sledgehammers. It would be dangerous to attract the monsters because of the noise. But they had no other choice. The scientist asks Dong to look ahead. That's because there was some creature standing in the middle of the path. The girl warns from afar that there are several enemies behind them. There were dozens of Guritas approaching. Upon realizing they were coming toward her, she starts shooting. Our hero warns he will finish clearing the debris so they can escape. But right at his side, one of the monsters emerges from the mud. At that moment, he hesitates whether to fight the creature or keep clearing the path. However, Guritas start to dig themselves out, and they were very close to our protagonist to attack him. One of them jumps toward him. At the last second, someone fires a shot, saving our hero. Ingress was inside the car and tells him to run inside. The boy starts running desperately while the creatures chased him. It was a huge number of monsters, and they begin to speed the car to escape. The worst part is that these creatures could call reinforcements. And that's exactly what was happening. Outside, Dong manages to hit some hammer blows on the creatures' heads. But something was catching his attention. From afar, he saw a light shining above the bridge. It was as if someone was there. And this person turned on a light again, signaling. He was understanding that light signal. So he asked Langat to adjust the radio signal to frequency 70. She asked him to open the side ear cover and started adjusting the radio on his helmet, moving the device to the correct frequency. Thus, he began analyzing the radio frequencies that could be transmitted by that person on the bridge. Again, the signal started arriving with a code emitted by the flashlight. It was a robot from his crew trying to contact Dong. Finally, they managed to reach the correct frequency. And Alexia asks if he is a member of the Atalante crew, and to confirm asks him to declare affiliation, rank, and code name. She needed this information to confirm his identity. Then Dong says his name and the other information she asked. After that, Alexia confirms the identity and asks for instructions from the maintenance team leader. With that, he orders Alexia to provide fire support. And from the bridge, she starts aiming at the creatures around the vehicle. He confirms, saying she can shoot. And thus he got a new ally in his mission. Since she was in a privileged position, she could have an advantage in shooting. And with that, she started eliminating the creatures from above. Alexia's shots were accurate since she was an android. And they began to feel relieved because she could. And so they start entering the base inside the island. However, the creatures were still chasing them. And our hero was out of battery to keep shooting. He asks the android to release some weapons for them to use. And in response, Alexia says she will provide batteries. That was enough, so he orders her to move position. The girl, who was also by his side shooting, asks if that robot was an ally, and he said yes. She would open the doors so they could enter the fortress. She had reached the designated position and asks for combat information about the enemies. He explains that these creatures have bodies similar to vertebrates. These here were a slightly smaller version of the Guritas. And even though they were smaller, they were strong and fast. Besides, they were intelligent because they could even hold Dong's hammer. He mentions these creatures are clever, and one creature ends up pulling him off the vehicle. The girl screams, worried about her companion. Then she jumps, trying to hold him. She manages to save him, preventing Dong from falling onto the car. Dong thanks her for saving him. There was a sharp curve ahead and they would need to hold tight. The creatures kept chasing, and already inside, Alexia starts shooting the monsters. Little by little, she was eliminating them one by one. Since he had provided information about the aliens, she was able to choose the most effective weapon. Soon after, Dong tells them to hold their weapons and move forward. He goes to talk to the android and perform the ocular recognition. After that, she confirms his identity. It was necessary to do this confirmation so he could give complex orders to the robot. Now he could give the important mission protocol, which was to protect the team's life. According to the Arcadia mission protocol, all entities were hostile. And that's why the androids were trained to defend humans. She jumps toward the aliens, and starts fighting all of them. Those monsters were powerful, but Alexia was made for combat and thus manages to defeat several of them. It seemed these monsters would not give up until they satisfied their hunger. Dong takes advantage to shoot since they were at some distance. She warns the crew to hide and that she would stay behind. And after eliminating all the monsters she would go after them. But our protagonist says she wouldn't need to defeat them all, just enough to escape alive. The scientist was managing to open the doors and asked the human if it was reliable to trust that robot. He appears and says yes because she stayed behind so they could escape. But they were not trusting the android much. Dong tries to calm them, saying Alexia was created to help survive outside the ship. In other words, she was created precisely for combat, and we see that she really was very powerful. However, the monsters kept coming. It was as if thousands of guritas appeared at every moment. But she continues outside, spinning around all of them. Without showing any emotion, he tells the scientist to open the door because Alexia was already returning. And so he pulls the lever. The robot was returning to them so they could enter safely. And she comes illuminating the corridor. The battle had been intense and she warns that it weakened the horde of creatures. I don't know about you, but just looking at her face I also get suspicious. The young man says she did a great job and she asks if these were his companions. Then he introduces them, saying they are Boomians and their names are Langat and Ingris. She asks if by any chance they understand the human language. And our protagonist said yes. However, she didn't trust them and pointed her weapon. The boy asks what Alexia was doing and orders her to put that blade on the ground. However, the android girl insists that he translate those words for the Boomians. She says it was they who shot down the Atalanti ship. The mood gets tense. And our hero confirms with the scientist if he had understood what she said, since she spoke in English. The scientist confirms, saying it was their species who shot down the Atalanti ship. The android warns them not to act with hostility since the girl was holding a weapon. And Alexia still warns if she lost control of her blade something bad could happen. And the damage would be irreparable. Our hero warns again for her to drop the weapon. And the scientist says he will answer any questions they have. The first thing Alexia would like to know is why they shot down the ship. The guy says they didn't order the attack. In fact, it was other Boomians, and it was an autonomous decision of the attack satellite. She asks if by any chance he has contact with others of his species. And in response he says that in the current situation trying to communicate with others would basically be asking to die. At that moment he started speaking without an accent, showing that he knew the human language very well. He warns that long ago the Guritas were only wild and fierce animals that attacked the peoples of this world. However, there was a positive side to the attacks of the Guritas, and to fight them the Korik was created. And the Boomians began working hard on technological advancement. And they stopped using simple blade weapons. Those swords until then were their only forms of defense. Then they discovered that those Guritas came to this planet riding meteors. What they thought were wild animals were actually space-invading beings. Shocked by this, they created a planetary cooperation system. That's why they created a mechanism to intercept meteors that fell on the planet. However, moments later they discovered there was a supermassive meteor that could destroy the planet Boomi. This meteor was gigantic. The Great Assembly decided to migrate to another planet and restart life there. And that's when all the problem began. Those with central roles in the system said they would leave first to handle a pioneer mission. Those who had not been chosen began to rebel. And so the planet Boomi split. Some fought until the end for their survival, trying to escape the planet. But those they trusted ended up betraying everyone. And we see that several Boomians ended up being eliminated in this war. Also, the most powerful could escape alive. It was a dark war. And to protect his daughter he had to escape to a distant place. And ended up taking the little one with him inside a bunker. He did that so they could survive. Otherwise he would be eliminated with all the others who stayed behind. And Alexia asks why then he accepted Dong. In response he said the young man spoke of the Atalanti engine that could destroy the approaching meteor. In other words, the boy was the last hope. The android asks our hero if he believes what they are saying, and he said yes. However, that was not enough for her to believe. However, if he had arrived alone on this planet and did not trust anyone, he would not be alive. In other words, it was necessary to trust each other. If he didn't trust them, surely the Arcadia project mission would have been in vain. And even if they managed to escape the planet with the ship, they wouldn't find any other habitable planet. Alexia said she understood everything. According to the team protection protocols, she had to verify their identity. And with that she would reduce the alert level. Now she would trust them a little more. And still asks Dong what was their objective upon arriving at this base on the island. In fact, this place controlled the low-altitude reconnaissance satellites. When the tide was high, those creatures managed to enter the base, so they needed to act quickly. They should activate the system to find the ship and leave quickly from there. The father and daughter agree with that, and so they decide to work together to save this planet since it was their last hope. The Ingress says that the corridor leads to the command center on the 3rd floor of the central tower. His daughter could sense the Gurita's pheromones, so they should prepare for combat. And there really was a monster far away. In part 1, you said that this alien language is inspired by a language spoken in Indonesia. And I researched that Gurita in that language means octopus. Dong shoots the creature, and even asks if this Gurita was the same species as the others, since the size and movement are different. The girl said these creatures were born at an early stage of development. They looked a lot like ancestors in an embryonic state, but when they were about to be born, they evolved into this current form. It's as if they were born at a different stage than those bigger aliens. In other words, they are less evolved because they were born prematurely. One question from our hero was how they could sense pheromones to call for help when it was raining. In response, she said it's because of electricity, and he asks if the monsters could use radio waves. In fact, they could produce bioelectricity, especially when it was raining. And he even imagines that the debris on the road was there by the alien's own order. Dong asks Alexia if she had ever seen anything like it, and she said no. At that moment, the girl smells a strong scent of pheromones, but our hero saw nothing ahead, and even asks if they were behind them. To the guy's misfortune, monster saliva drips on his arm. The creatures were above them. The creature falls on top of our hero, and ends up hitting his helmet with a powerful blow. He feels the impact. Holding his weapon, he starts firing multiple shots. When he gets up, he asks if his companions were okay, and realizes that they were all being attacked too. The girl defended herself as best she could, while the android took them down effortlessly. At that moment, Dong tells them to move forward, as the monsters were coming, and they all start running from the creatures. However, the monsters were faster, and they managed to catch up with them in seconds. So the android moves forward to protect the scientist, and manages to eliminate the creature with her weapon. Ingress thanks Alexia, and starts to trust her a little more. Meanwhile, they were moving through the tunnels, but a Gurita blocked the way. They were face to face. Then Dong asks Langit to get his plasma cutter. She takes the weapon from behind her back, and they go side by side, clearing the way and taking down the monsters. It seemed endless, as more kept coming. With the plasma blade, she manages to cut an alien in half. Our protagonist asks the scientist for help. That's because they had just reached a crossroads. The man says to turn right, and they end up going that way to check if it was safe. But that's exactly where the Guritas were coming from. Dong even thinks this will never end. After long minutes, they manage to find the exit, and he alerts the scientist through the helmet radio that they are safe. They had stayed behind to open the doors with the lever. While he worked on the equipment, Alexia covered him. On the radio, he says the lower floor was clear. With that, our hero decides to go down there. The path was locked, and they couldn't open it with the lever, so they needed to find another way to get there, since Langit could smell Boomian pheromones. Ingress understands and says he will try to open this other door. He pulls the lever, but it seems the door was stuck, so they need to push it with their own hands. They hear a Boomian noise and say they are part of the defense, so they should be calm. From behind the rubble, the man asks if they really were from the defense force. The scientist said yes and asks the man to come out from behind. Raising his hands, the man says he belongs to Taiganoba 76, the former Northern Research Group, and his name was Taras. Ingress asks what he was doing in a place like this. And desperate, the man said he was running from traitors, and was lucky to hide there, but had gotten separated from his family. He starts asking for help to find his Mokura. Our hero imagines that this word Mokura means family, and the man starts crying, begging them to help. Dong asks Ingress if he was referring to his wife and children, and the scientist confirms yes. Speaking in the Boomian language, he asks which department Taras worked in. He was from the secretary's office, and his direct superior was named Mora. With that, Ingress confirms he was telling the truth, and starts entering the place, asking everyone to lower their weapons. He knew who this man was, and had already worked with him. Upon learning it was the scientist Ingress, the man said he remembers him because they did research together, and he starts begging them to help save his wife and child. Alexia said they can't waste time saving other people because the mission's priority is to recover Atalante's parts. The man asks what that is, and Dong tells the man to think of that android as if it were an alien who came to save this planet. Then the man asks if that propulsion unit that fell near the research group belonged to them. Curious, our hero asks him to tell the details. The man saw a huge piece of ship fall with solar panels and the drawing of a humanoid. That was exactly what Dong was looking for, and the man knew where it was. If they help search for his family, he will guide them to the place where the wreckage fell. He asks Alexia if this would be useful for the mission, and she says the success rate would increase by 36%. So he decides to help Taras's family, and tells the scientist that this could be useful. Ingress asks if the man has any idea how to escape this base. He says there's a Barra Langita in the upper hangar, but he didn't know how to operate it. Ingress knows how to control it, and tells Dong that the Barra Langita is like a ship. While he went to the hangar to get the aircraft, he should search for Taras's family. Since it would be riskier, it was better for Dong to take Alexia and Langita. The man is grateful. However, Our hero thought it would be better for the girl to go along with her father. She was crying, and he asked if she was okay. Actually, she just felt sympathy for that man. The scientist agrees to take his daughter to protect him, and Dong promises he will return with everyone safe. They start descending into the depths of the base. They had walked quite a bit, and the man said his family was in the submarine hangar, at the lowest level of the fortress. On the radio, the scientist asks if Dong has reached the place, and he says he's getting close. Ingress was almost done assembling the aircraft. Some parts still needed to be fitted. Since the radio was silent, the scientist asked if Dong was okay, and the guy said they had just found Terrace's family. He had reunited with his wife and son, and they hugged. On the radio, the scientist told them to return immediately. The man introduces his family to our hero and to the android, saying they are aliens from planet Earth. Speaking in the Boomian language, he introduces himself and says they need to leave quickly because it was dangerous there. As they walked, they felt some tremors. On the radio, Ingress said it could be the gates opening. There was a submarine down there, and they decided to get closer. The place gave them chills, and they thought gorillas could appear at any moment. And that's exactly what happens. The monsters start arriving. Ingress asks on the radio if Dong can see the hangar, but he couldn't see anything. So they start running another way, trying to reach the east zone. He alerts the scientist on the radio so he'll know where to find them. After knowing the location, he boards the ship to meet them there. And with that, they end up confirming the location. The exit was around the next corner. They were already very close to getting out. However, they end up shocked. It was a dead end, and the monsters were right behind them. Taurus says they could open that door manually. They just needed to pull the left lever. He goes there to try to open the doors, but the water starts rising in the hangar. They panic, imagining they could drown. Alexia manages to save the man's wife and tells her to be careful with the electric shocks. So our hero asks the android to pull the lever. After climbing back up to the platform, Taurus tells his wife and son to go first. The two put in a lot of effort to pull the lever. And then the mechanisms start working, and the gate opens. Now they could finally get out of there. However, the gate ends up closing again. It would only stay open if someone held the lever longer. They hear shouts telling them to run quickly. And when they look back, it was Taurus holding that lever, so they could escape. Dong asks if the man is sure about this. Then the android slaps our hero on the back so he'll run, and so they start escaping the place. The gates were open, and the man shouts loudly, telling the location of the ship's wreckage. He said it was in the Sulphur Stone area, southwest of the Northern Research Group headquarters. And as the monster approached, he asks Dong to protect his family. Our hero says goodbye to him, confirming that he will protect them, and the monster keeps coming after them. Then they are attacked, and the impact throws them far away. The little boy is hurled several meters high, but Dong manages to reach in time and protects the boy so he won't hit the ground hard. As he gets up, he asks if the boy is okay, and the boy says yes. Arriving with the aircraft, the scientist says on the radio that they must leave immediately because they were surrounded. There were gorillas everywhere, and the guy is already starting to panic. Meanwhile, Alexia was buying time, taking down several creatures. There was a giant alien that could release electric shocks, and the android ends up being electrocuted and falls unconscious. Dong was face to face with this huge monster, and it seemed everything was lost.
The electric monster finally falls into the water, but Dong still protects the child from the other gorillas. He looks up and shouts to Ingress that they are almost there, asking to lower the altitude. The scientist confirms that he understood the message, piloting the aircraft amid the shots. With that, the body of the giant gorilla sinks, releasing a dark slime into the water. But suddenly, an impact hits the aircraft, making it lose control in the air. Dong warns that the wing hit the mud, shouting that it will be an emergency landing. He gets scared when he sees that the smaller gorillas are already running toward them. Then he grabs the little boy and asks him to cover his ears because he will use an ability. Our hero enters the water and starts shooting at the creatures that approach quickly. Even surrounded on all sides, he keeps firing non-stop to protect the boy. The little boy asks to be put on the ground, leaving Dong confused by the request. He complies and calls the boy's name, Nova, who positions himself in the water. Then the boy takes a deep breath, concentrating a bluish energy in his hands. He stares at the advancing monsters, creating a circle of power around him. With a pulse of energy, he unleashes a sonic wave that paralyzes all the gorillas. The creatures stop in the middle of the attack, completely immobilized by the ability. The boy becomes exhausted while the monsters stand still, only watching. Then an energy shot hits the head of one of the aliens directly. It was Langut who approaches asking if Dong Youngsu is okay. He says everything's fine and asks about the ship, and she says that Ingress is fixing it. Dong tries to call Alexia on the radio, identifying himself and asking her to report the situation. But the android informs that the system is still recovering, with 50% completed. She detects currents in the water and reports that a giant gorilla seems to command the others. Then Dong reports that the little boy stopped the attack, but the aircraft landed because of the monster. He notices that the gorillas are moving in groups toward Ingress, who is repairing the ship. The scientist shouts, asking Langut to buy him some time while he finishes the repairs. Alexia concludes that the situation is bad, and that the only solution is to eliminate the commanding creature. With the system recovering, she calculates the success rate and awaits Dong's orders. From afar, Langat lands a precise shot on the giant monster, drawing its attention. But the son of Taras shouts desperately, warning that more Garitas are coming from behind. Dong calls for Nova and quickly pulls a cable from his utility belt. Carrying the boy on his back, he asks the child to hold on tightly. Then he dodges the attack of a Garita, with Nova using his powers to help. The hero keeps fighting the monsters, with the aircraft flying right above them. Over the radio, Ingress announces that he is already airborne and asks for the plasma cutter to be delivered. Alexia then joins the channel, asking if it is Ingress who will receive the weapon. But Langat on a hang glider shouts that she will do the job herself. Seeing the drone approaching, Dong tells Alexia that he confirmed the location and orders to descend. The android, however, gives the opposite command, ordering to maintain altitude and speed. She explains that this way, the calculation becomes easier, and she launches the weapon toward them. Alexia calculates that the success rate is 100%, and Langat grabs the weapon and tells Ingress to go for the target. The scientist confirms that he understood, piloting the aircraft toward the giant monster. With the weapon in hand, Langat dives from the skies. She hits the creature's head directly. The giant monster roars in pain in front of her. The aircraft flies quickly toward the bridge. With that, she manages to attach some cables to the structure. Finally, the giant creature falls defeated. Langat calls for Dong Youngsu while the ship pulls all of them upward. Then the girl manages to grab his hand. They are pulled up, finally escaping that dangerous situation. With their leader defeated, the smaller Garitas climb the giant body, completely lost. With no one to command them, they start fighting among themselves, and Dong watches everything from above. The scene changes and Dong is sitting on the beach when the radio asks if everything is secure. He turns and asks worriedly if Alexia, the android, is okay after the battle. Alexia reports that her system is stable and that the Garitas are no longer a threat. Then Dong reports that their vehicle was flooded, but they managed to review the operation. The android states that despite the disadvantage, they succeeded in repelling the enemy. However, she appears holding Taras's wife and laments, beginning to report the casualties. Alexia then delivers the tragic news, reporting that Saren ended up dying. He looks at the horizon, wondering if everything would still be the same if they met again. Alexia continues holding the woman's body. She reports that their vehicle was flooded by the tide and became unusable, and confirms that both Saren and Taras died during the confrontation. The android also explains that Taras's body was too damaged to be recovered. From afar, Ingress and little Nova watch the scene. Seeing that Ingress covers the boy's eyes, asking him not to look and saying it's okay, but Nova says that his father used to say that everyone dies one day, and that it can happen sooner than expected. Turning to the side, Dong calls for Ingress. Then he asks what they usually do when someone dies on planet Bumi. Directly, Ingress explains that the bodies are recycled and transformed into resources for the planet. The doubt arises and Dong asks if there is no ceremony. In response, Ingress says they only deliver speeches of honor. For the hero, that system sounds far too suffocating. In silence, little Nova remains still without reacting. After reflecting, Dong decides that he will perform the honors in the way of Earth. The scientist agrees with the idea and tells him to do it. With a shovel in his hands, Dong walks to a distant spot and begins to dig the ground. After observing the terrain, he comments that the spot seems suitable for the burial. Alexia approaches and asks if Dong Youngsu needs help. In response, he asks her to bring food and water, and the android confirms that she understood. Soon after, Langat and her father announce that they will also help. Then he asks them to find something to write with and assist with the digging. The scene shows Dong digging, visibly exhausted. Between one movement and another, he thinks that he needs to hold strong through the whole situation. Later, Alexia arrives carrying the body and he comments that that person does not belong to paradise. With great care, he places the woman's body inside the grave. Then, he asks Alexia to find a flat stone and she agrees. Nearby, he finds a tree branch and begins to shape it using a knife. Curious, Alexia asks where she should place the stone and he asks that it be left in front of the tree. Two branches are lit, resembling improvised incense sticks. Using a case as support, he writes a message on a strip of fabric. Once again, he asks Alexia to bring the food and water and she confirms. Kneeling, he makes a silent bow, paying his respects. After that, he leaves the strip over the grave and steps back while Langat and Nova watch in silence. With a gentle voice, Dong calls the boy, who shows curiosity. Calmly, he explains that this is how they say farewell in the place he came from. Then he asks if Nova would like to try, and the boy replies that he also wants to do that. Before that, however, curiosity arises when he asks if there were letters written on that fabric. Confirming, Dong explains that he wrote in his own language, since he still does not know the Bumi tongue. The strips carried the messages to the beloved father Terrace and to the beloved mother Siren. Thoughtful, the boy repeats the word beloved softly. With patience, Dong teaches the boy to put his hands together, kneel and bow twice. Following each instruction, Nova makes the bow before the grave. When Dong says that he can rise, little Nova begins to cry. Through tears, he confesses that he misses his mother and father very much. Gently, Dong comforts him, saying they have not disappeared, and that they will always live in your heart. Finally, he explains that now they will send them to heaven and burns the strip of fabric. Holding the burning cloths, he wonders if they will meet in heaven. He raises the strips and sees a vision of Ingress and Langet with the little boy, and the ashes scatter through the night sky. Ingress asks if Terrace said where Atalanti is, and Dong confirms. He then tells Ingress to take Bara Langeta in the morning and depart. The scientist tells him to rest well that night. Dong says goodbye, saying see you tomorrow. The scene shifts to him alone, wondering if he should have lied to the boy. Then he remembers having said that Nova's parents would always live in his heart. He thinks that when he was young he believed that good people went to heaven and bad people to hell. But now he knows the truth. He remembers that both good people and bad people do not leave but remain alive in dreams, tormenting him forever. The scene cuts to a flashback where a scientist explains that blood expands when frozen. That is why, in hibernation, they remove almost all the moisture from the body, including the blood. Then they inject an antifreeze solution, putting the body into low consumption mode. The doctor warns of the risks of organ damage and that the training can cause disability or death. He hears that the section chiefs will collect the forms for training. A soldier named Liam is shocked to learn that he is allergic to the antifreeze. He asks if that means he was disqualified, and the doctor confirms the reassignment. Dong tells him that if he wants he can return to his original unit. The young man is frustrated, saying that he was doing well but because of an allergy, but Dong interrupts, explaining coldly that he could die during hibernation. The soldier rises, defeated, saying that he understands the situation. He then salutes, saying that it was a pleasure working with them. Then Dong asks how many are left, and the doctor replies that only 2 remain. The next candidate is called Jocelyn Yates, and her file is shown. Dong turns to her, asking if Jocelyn has any health concerns. There is concern about possible allergies, but the doctor assures that the exams found nothing. Even so, the girl becomes nervous and asks if she will be disqualified if she fails the training. Calmly, Dong tells her that if she feels too insecure, she does not need to sign the form. He emphasizes that there is the option to return to her own unit, which makes her thoughtful. After a few seconds, Jocelyn signs the form and asks if shaving her hair will be necessary during training. She admits that it worries her a little but keeps a confident smile on her face. Soon after, the doctor informs Dong that the last candidate on the list has a brain implant. The young man introduces himself as David Zimmerman and explains that he has already removed the implant to participate in the mission. The doctor shows concern, explaining that even when removed, metallic residues in the brain can still be dangerous. With firmness, David says that he knows the risks and argues that practically all astronauts use implants. Seeking confirmation, Dong asks the doctor if the documentation is correct. Without hesitation, she confirms that everything is in order. Determined, David signs the form, making it clear that he will participate in the training no matter what. Sometime later, Dean approaches and calls for the section chief. With a serious expression, he asks which soldiers were dismissed from the training. Without hesitation, Dong replies that they were Ray, Jesse, and Liam, mentioning that Jesse is returning to Alaska. Surprised by the number, Dean asks if Dong has already gone through the hibernation training. In response comes the explanation that he is not, because although he is part of the Space Force, his life was shaped by the Army. At that moment, Dean comments that he has done the training before but seems uneasy about something. In light of that, Dong looks at him seriously and states that hibernation training, regardless of what happens, is a technical problem, completes Dean with a heavy look. With a brief gesture, he places a hand on Dong's shoulder and says that he hopes everything will happen without accidents. Soon after, Dong walks down the corridor and the scene shifts to him and his team during training. A voice echoes over the loudspeaker, ordering all personnel to enter the hibernation chambers. The officer requests that the engineers signal when everything is ready to begin anesthesia. The maintenance team reports that chambers 1 and 2 are ready. After general confirmation, the anesthesia process begins. The freezing system activates, wishing them a good night. Meanwhile, Dong thinks that the worst part of hibernation is not being able to wake up even when the nightmares begin. Thus, a disturbing dream arises tied to one of his most traumatic memories. The image of a burning car invades his mind. Reflected in the fire, he watches the flames until he feels a hand touch his shoulder. A girl wearing headphones approaches while the flames seem to grow stronger. Suddenly, the nightmare breaks and Dong wakes up startled in a hospital bed. Attentive, the doctor observes and reports that Dong Young-soo has regained consciousness. Without wasting time, his first question is whether the team members are all right. A bald colleague appears jokingly, saying that that body is still alive. Another soldier comments that although 2 weeks have passed, it felt like only a nap. Hearing that, Dong feels great relief and gives thanks that everyone is fine. A faint smile appears on his face. Suddenly, however, a terrible memory invades his mind. Someone faints and falls from the stretcher, causing panic to spread through the hospital. A voice shouts that a crew member has collapsed and asks them to check his breathing. Confused, Dong thinks that it can only be a nightmare and remembers that he is on planet Boomy. He tries to convince himself that it is nothing more than exhaustion from the previous day's battle. Trapped in his own memories, he questions why that dream refuses to end. Back in the present, Langet points excitedly toward creatures that resemble llamas. Curious, Dong asks what those things are. In response, she says it is also her first time seeing them. As they approach, little Nova shows some fear of the creatures. And the aircraft finally lands, ending their journey and escape from the Garitas. Dong asks Alexia if she knows what happened to the Atalante, but the android has no answer. Ingress warns that the ship's battery is almost out, asking everyone to prepare for landing. He asks Nova if the boy remembers which tunnel they came through. The boy is not sure but recalls a device at his father's waist when they exited. With that information, Ingress says he has a rough idea where it is. Suddenly, Nova lets out a cry of surprise. Dong asks what it was and sees a small white animal running between the leaves. Langet explains that it is a creature called Rabba. Ingress asks if it is not beautiful and Nova agrees, finding the animal cute. Langet offers to catch the creature for the boy, leaving Nova confused. Then Dong explains to her that they need to catch the animal in order to eat it. Langet understands and with a precise strike, captures the small Rabba. Then Ingress spots a cave and suggests they spend the night there. Already inside the cave, they prepare a campfire and Langet returns from an exploration. Langet comes back cheerful, announcing that she managed to catch 2 Rabba for dinner. Dong's mouth waters and he tells them to eat quickly. They place the meat to roast over the fire. Ingress removes the meat, saying that it is well cooked and that they can eat first. Then Dong offers a piece to Nova, asking the boy to try it. But the boy feels sorry, remembering the cute creature from before. Dong even jokes, saying that if Nova will not eat, he will have to eat it all himself. Then Alexia warns that alien meat can cause problems because it has different proteins. He asks, so what? And the android says she will perform an allergy test on him. She rubs a piece of the meat on Dong's hand and he watches his skin begin to react. Alexia reports that the reaction was severe and that he should not eat, leaving Dong frustrated. He then asks Nova if the boy wants to eat mushrooms and the boy makes a disgusted face. Seeing that, Dong says that he is right because one must eat meat to grow strong. Ingress takes the chance to ask Nova who taught him his Paluma abilities. The boy replies that he learned everything from a master named Paraka. Ingress asks in surprise if Master Paraka is still alive. Nova explains that they fled the village when it was attacked and does not know what happened to his master. The scientist becomes thoughtful, concluding that worries seem to have no end. Dong thinks it would be better to rest but wonders if he should have brought his guitar. Calling for Alexia, Dong asks if the recovered plasma cutter was very damaged. The android explains that the compressor needs repairs, but the magnetic field control still works. An idea arises, and he asks if it would be possible to produce sound by connecting the device. Alexia raises her hand and asks if he would like to try. Around them, the other Boomians watch curiously as Dong begins testing the device. With Alexia's help, he adjusts the frequency until he manages to emit the note E. Attentive to detail, Langet notices the use of electromagnetic fields, and he confirms it. He then explains that he converted the field's interference into sound through Alexia. Delighted, Langet comments that his posture resembles someone playing a guitar. The word guitar echoes in Dong's mind. Excited, he invites Ingress to try, and the scientist observes the improvised instrument with curiosity. With patience, Dong teaches Ingress how to play, while Langet, enthusiastic, says that she also wants to try. Turning to little Nova, he calls the boy's attention. Soon after, he teaches the boy to drum on a box and Nova joins the fun. Smiling, Dong says that Langet has the most important part. Curious, she asks what that would be. Then he begins to hum, asking her to try to follow what he says. Langet tries to imitate the sound, but Dong corrects her, explaining that the pitch must be exactly the same. With everyone playing together, the improvised band begins to make music. Langet becomes very excited, asking if this is Dong Youngsu's music. Calmly, Dong explains that people who make music together are called a band, imagining what it would be like if the Boomians formed one. In a tone of regret, he comments that they do not have a real guitar to play. To give more flavor to the simple sound, he says he will try something different. In his hands, he takes his friend's journal and wonders if he should add a rap using Dean's lyrics. Soon after, he asks them to try creating a melody over the rhythm he set. Thus, he begins to hum the rap while Langet tries to follow, curious. The song continues with his friend's words speaking about what truly matters in life. In silence, they all lift their eyes to the starry sky, enjoying that rare moment of peace and music. The next morning, the conversation arises about the plan to find the ship's wreckage. Dong confirms that it will be necessary to pass through the village but emphasizes that the traitors must be avoided at all costs. Upon reaching the entrance to the village, he makes it clear that he wants to avoid an urban battle. Turning to the group, he informs them that they are part of the Northern Research Team. Observant, Ingress comments that the landscape is quite different from what they were used to seeing. Drawing attention, several scattered crosses make Dong deduce that they are the structures mentioned by Nova. With some humor, Ingress says that the place looks like a metal album cover. Calmly, Langet explains that it is part of an ancient defense system and asks them not to worry. A strong, sweet smell fills the air, making Dong ask if Ingress is alright with the pheromones. Uncertain, Langet comments that she cannot tell whether the smell comes from a Garita or a Boomian, but she senses something refined in it. Confirming, Ingress warns that the odor is all over the village and orders everyone to put on their helmets. Once protected, Dong asks Nova if he knows where the villagers went. Uncertain, the boy says that he fled during the fight but points out that the battle happened on one side of the village. Curious, Ingress asks how many enemies took part in the conflict. In response, Nova says there were about 200 villagers defeated by the enemies. Finding the place too quiet for such a large force, Langet asks why Nova is not wearing a helmet. Patiently, Ingress explains that due to Paluma training, he has much greater control over chemical signals. Seeking to understand, Dong asks if that relates to the ability to control Garitas in the sea. The scientist replies that it is a rare ability based on using the right pheromones at the exact moment. Curious, Nova asks if Dong cannot sense pheromones. As an explanation, he says that on his planet pheromones are used mainly by insects, such as ants and bees. The revelation comes next when Ingress explains that Paluma does not only control the Garitas, but also the Boomians themselves. Shocked, Dong asks how that kind of control works. Didactically, the scientist explains that it all happens through the sending of signals such as orders to attack or to stop. Continuing, he states that the emotions of those exposed to the pheromones synchronize with the order received. Repeating aloud, Langet mentions attack or stop, highlighting the simplicity of the command. In light of that, Dong realizes how dangerous the Paluma ability is. Seeking to reassure him, Ingress says that the helmets offer protection and that they can also use pheromones. As a final detail, Nova comments that a Paluma can be identified by the white color of their hair. Understanding the logic, Dong asks if Ingress would not be a Paluma since his hair is black. Ingress confirms that he is not, explaining that he only knows this because of former colleagues. Suddenly, Alexia warns that her sensor has detected movement. She reports that there is a presence at 12 o'clock, human-sized. Langet senses the danger and shouts for them to retreat for now. Dong begins to run and asks Alexia to locate the target precisely, but the android warns that she detected movement from above. Dong barely has time to react when a masked warrior jumps toward him. The enemy attacks him with a sword, but Dong manages to block the blow. He counterattacks with a shot from his weapon, hitting the warrior's helmet. But the masked one is fast and delivers a powerful kick, disarming him. The enemy's helmet breaks, revealing a Boomian face marked by a red eye. Shocked, little Nova wonders if that could be his master. Without giving him time to react, the warrior releases red smoke, preparing for a new attack. Ingress asks if that really is Paraka. Nova shouts desperately for his master to stop, but he does not hear. Langet prepares to shoot, but Paraka advances quickly. He dodges the shots with his sword. The master attacks Dong, who defends himself from the blows. Paraka manages to disarm him and strikes his helmet. With a swift move, the enemy jumps and spins his sword. Dong does not understand how he was hit, feeling the impact of the blow. Langet shouts for Dong Young-soo, worried. Smoke begins to come out of Dong's helmet. He falls to the ground, suffocating, saying that he cannot breathe. Langet realizes that she cannot use her long-range weapon. She activates her powers, her eyes turning yellow, releasing red smoke. With her weapon transformed into a sword, she prepares for combat. Paraka faces her, ready for the duel about to begin. Langet charges fully to attack, but a mysterious voice shouts for them to stop. The fight halts, and a woman orders Paraka to retreat. She apologizes for the attack, revealing that the warrior's name is indeed Paraka. Meanwhile, Dong remains on the ground, unable to breathe. Langet notices that the tube of his helmet was cut and offers hers. But Dong refuses, feeling dizzy. Langet removes his helmet and is startled by his facial reaction. Dong tries to catch his breath with several red patches on his skin. Alexia explains that it is an immune reaction due to pheromones in the air. She says that they first need to give him oxygen and then find a remedy. Nova offers to control the pheromones, if that is the problem. The mysterious woman approaches and asks if they are the owners of the ship that crashed nearby. She comments that the ship had many interesting technologies. In a careful tone, the woman offers to help if they need assistance. Nearby, Alexia approaches Langet, who observes the entire scene with suspicion. Intrigued, the mysterious woman wonders why they have not asked for help yet. With concern, Alexia warns that Dong's allergic reaction is worsening. Unable to breathe properly, the hero tries to bring something to his mouth for air. In a quick gesture, Langet offers her own helmet to him. The warning comes immediately after when Alexia explains that the aerosol concentration is high and could affect Langet. Insistently, the mysterious woman asks again if they are the owners of the crashed ship. Then she comments that they clearly seem to need help. Seeking information, Alexia asks if she knows anything about the Atalangti ship. Without hesitation, the woman confirms, saying that she has already searched for the ship in hopes of finding new technologies. Naturally, she invites the group to talk in her workshop. As they walk, the question arises about what brought them to that place. They follow the mysterious woman up the stairs. Along the way, Alexia explains that Earth has become uninhabitable and that their planet is threatened by a meteor. Understanding the situation, the woman realizes that the mission involves destroying the Ragbata and shows interest. Curious, she asks if they are claiming to be the saviors of planet Bumi. Thoughtfully, Alexia responds that if everything goes as planned, they could be seen that way. Even so, the android remains suspicious of that woman. With a light smile, the white-haired woman comments that their story is very moving. Soon after, little Nova calls for Ingress. Approaching, he leans in and whispers something into the scientist's ear. Ingress listens attentively but shows no reaction. The woman says that she recovered some items from their species, but she warns that she is not sure if there is any medicine in the boxes. She suggests that perhaps it would be better if they made the medicine themselves. Seeking a solution, Alexia asks if there is any way to do that. In response, the woman asks if they are familiar with the Boomians' physical enhancement. Objectively, the android explains that she understands the process as physiological changes induced by pheromones. Then comes the revelation that the enhancement is not entirely natural. To prove it, the woman shows a capsule and explains that in reality they use a type of stimulant. Holding the capsules, she states that those individuals are the true main characters of the story. Immediately, Alexia performs a scan with her eyes. Precisely, she asks if the capsules contain nanorobots. Without denying it, the woman explains that Boomians receive these injections while young to learn how to use them. When the red pheromones enter the body, strength increases but side effects appear. It is these nanobots that control and regulate the effects of pheromones in the organism. Faced with that, Alexia asks if the intention is to use the method to suppress Dong's immune reaction. Confirming, the woman explains that she intends to train the nanobots to contain this reaction. On alert, she warns that adjustments will be necessary since the robots are optimized for Boomians. Without hesitation, Alexia hands over a bag containing Dong's blood, serving as a control for the experiment. With a confident smile, the woman asks if they trust her abilities. The scene shifts to the laboratory where she analyzes cell samples. Attentive to every detail, Alexia observes the process, waiting for a positive result. Curious, Langet approaches and asks what that woman's affiliation was. In response, she reveals that she tried to become a priestess, leaving Ingress surprised. Puzzled, the woman asks why Ingress still cares about affiliations. He explains that her knowledge is something only priests would possess. Faced with that, Ingress presses her, wanting to know who she really is. Calmly, she introduces herself as Panora and states that high-ranking positions always remain in the hands of nobles. Soon after, she adds that her real name is Talana, and that she was part of the Northeastern Council. Upon hearing the name Talana, Langet is visibly shocked. With an enigmatic smile, Panora says that, like the priests, she too used to captivate people on stage. But she laments, saying that someone of common origin like her could never become a priestess. Ingress reprimands her, saying that such a statement is an insult to the Boomian federal system. Without hesitation, Panora retorts that his hypocritical attitude is no different from that of the nobles. Immediately after, she injects something into Dong's hand, as he lies down, vulnerable. On alert, Alexia warns that his body temperature is dropping. Worried, she asks about his breathing, and Dong replies that he feels much better. After analyzing the data, the android confirms that the treatment is working and thanks Panora. Firmly, Panora replies that she is the one who should be grateful for their dedication to planet Bumi. Finally, she states that if the Boomians were as sincere as they are, the situation would never have reached this point. Ingress becomes suspicious of what she is saying. Panora encourages him to ask what he wants, guessing that he is wondering if she is a traitor. The scientist stays silent, neither confirming nor denying. She smiles and asks if he wants her answer. Ingress asks why she helped them, knowing they were from the defense force. Panora says their story moved her more than the so-called Raja's plan. She glances at Langet, who appears distrustful. Panora then asks them to tell her in detail what role she could play in this story. Dong is resting, still recovering from the allergic reaction. Panora asks with a smile if they came there by killing the Garitas one by one. Ingress explains that they were attacked and asks if there is another way to fight. She reveals that the colored field outside is the trace of a nerve gas. Ingress is shocked, while Panora says she prefers the style of the old heroes. Langet confronts her, asking why she would betray the traitors again. Panora says that she also wants to save the planet, but that there is a problem with their plan. Ingress asks what problem that is, saying that he has the power to solve it. She points out that they are merely looking for wreckage on the ground, and that to destroy the meteor, they would need to go into space. But they have no plan for that. Dong remains lying down, feeling sweat trickle down his skin. Panora reveals that the nearest spaceport has been taken over by someone called Raja. She says they will need many more people to take the site or reach space. Ingress questions her, asking if she alone can make that possible. She turns and asks if he thinks she is a hopeless fool. Panora then reveals her army with several synchronized warriors. She says that she found many talented people there and that they can use them. Ingress is shocked, asking if she synchronized them all. The woman confirms, saying that everything is part of Raja's plan. She reveals that the objective is to let all Boomians die while dreaming happy dreams, up until the planet's final moment. Panora says that Raja does not understand emotions, and that is why he created such a childish plan. Ingress demands that she free the people so they can talk better. She challenges him, asking if he wants the people to wake up and attack them. Ingress insists, telling her to release the group's members and leave with them. The woman stares at him, asking if his plan is for her to save the planet and live well while he hides. She presses him, asking who would be more useful to save the planet, him or her. Dong watches the argument, still recovering. He reflects that, although Ingress's reasoning is correct, Panora's plan does not seem wrong. Dong thinks that if Ingress accepted her help, they could easily gain troops. But he concludes that neutrality in the end only makes everyone lose. He remembers many scenes of pain and suffering. A memory of a panicked soldier hits him. Dong recalls a chess game. Dean asks what the section chief is doing, confused by his move. The move was a check, but he was not moving the king. Dong apologizes, saying that he focused too much and forgot the rule of check. Dean explains that chess is a game won with checkmate. He continues, saying that the king never dies in the game, only the pawns die, and he knocks down one of Dong's pieces. Dong realizes that those who die in battle are the soldiers, and that there is no such thing as easy troops to use. He turns to Panora and says that, although he needs manpower, he has one question. Our hero asks if when they find more Boomians, she will continue to use her current method. Panora says that she likes civilization in his dream, but that he has already made his decision. She invites him to join her, asking if he truly wants to kill more Boomians. Dong looks at her and says that if it is like the last battle, he only needs to eliminate the commander. Alexia turns suddenly, sensing danger. Then she quickly draws her weapon. The android fires toward Panora, ready to end the threat. With a simple gesture, Panora stops the bullet in midair. Then one of her controlled soldiers appears and attacks Alexia from behind. Dong warns that he and Alexia will hold them off and shouts for Langet to run. With a knife in hand, he charges forward but is quickly surrounded and knocked down. Panora looks at him and tells him not to worry, because she will not kill him. She reveals with a smile that he is the protagonist of that story. Dong gets up and shouts for Alexia to help the others, but the android warns that it is impossible as she is blocked by the soldiers. Our hero then spots one of his weapons nearby. He sees a soldier approaching, his face covered in blood. Dong lands a powerful punch on the enemy, and finishes him off with a precise stab. Surrounded, he orders the other soldiers to back away. One of them then grabs Dong's weapon from the ground, and throws it far away, disarming the hero. Alexia, still trapped, warns that Panora is moving. Then the controlled soldiers make way for their leader to approach. Ingress shouts for Panora to stop as he runs toward her. He charges against the controlled soldiers. Ingress and Paraka face each other, ready for battle. The scientist shouts for Langet to enter the hole just ahead. The two run and throw themselves into the passage, but Panora's soldiers keep chasing them. Already inside the tunnel, Ingress says it is a defensive passage and that they can rest. He is impressed by Panora's ability to control so many people at once. Ingress wonders if the pheromones are being released by the sprayers outside. He concludes that he needs to reach the control room and operate the sprayers. Suddenly, Ingress notices something wrong with his daughter. Langet is trembling, affected by the pheromones, but Nova holds her. The boy runs ahead, trying to stop her. Ingress shouts Langet's name, but she is already under Panora's control. Little Nova holds her tightly, shouting for her not to go. Nova keeps trying to restrain Langet. Ingress shouts for his daughter to wake up from the mind control, but she breaks free from Nova and threatens to strike him with her weapon. The boy falls to the ground, stunned. Langet then pins Nova down, ready to attack. Ingress wonders if it is because she is without a helmet. He realizes he must act as Langet continues trembling. Ingress removes his own helmet, showing his determined face. He approaches and shouts for Langet to run. The scientist warns that the operation has failed and orders her to flee in that direction. Langet, still confused, only hears her father's name. He commands her not to look back. He is sacrificing himself for her, and he urges her to hurry and escape. The girl calls for Nova. Langet turns and says they will follow the original plan, asking for the control room's location. Nova agrees and tells Langet to follow him. The two start running down the dark corridor. Ingress, still fighting, reports that Dong and Nova are heading to the control room. Dong volunteers to provide support and asks how to get there. Langit turns and asks if Nova knows the path to the control room. The boy shouts that they need to go straight ahead, take an elevator and go to the lower floor. Dong, still restrained, asks Alexia to separate the soldiers holding him. The android warns that she can only do that if he authorizes the use of violence against the Boomians. She asks if Dong approves the action. Our hero approves, but with the condition that Langit, Nova, and Ingress are not harmed. Alexia confirms that she understands the order. She prepares to fight, with her eyes glowing. The android unleashes all her power. She attacks the soldiers with full force. Without wasting time, Alexia begins clearing a path for Dong. The android displays incredible strength, taking down the soldiers one by one. She moves through them without showing mercy. With the enemies fallen to the ground, the advance continues without hesitation. Amid the battle, she manages to recover Dong's weapon. Without thinking twice, she uses it to strike down the remaining soldiers. Soon after, Dong joins the fight, immobilizing one of the warriors. Realizing the situation, the Boomian understands that he is lost. In a final effort, Dong delivers a powerful blow to one of the soldiers. Dong shouts for Alexia to run ahead toward the elevator. Our hero keeps fighting, clearing the way for the android. He spots the elevator but sees it full of soldiers. Dong realizes the situation is madness. On the lower floor, Langit and Nova find a strange machine. Nova explains that it seems to be a device that converts Guri to pheromones. Langit understands and tells Nova to hide somewhere safe. Langit positions herself with her weapon, ready to destroy the machine. The machine opens, revealing a strange creature. Panora asks if Langit thinks everything will end if she destroys that thing. She warns that if her command signal is cut, the controlled Boomians might end up killing each other. Panora says her goal is to save as many people as possible. A soldier approaches Langit, who lies on the ground defenseless. He attacks, but she manages to defend herself with her weapon. The two face each other, ready for a duel. Langit presses a button on her weapon, preparing an attack. She dodges the enemy's strike and manages to block the blow with her sword. The spark of battle lights up Langit's face. A monster appears, saying that he does not want to kill her either, and with a powerful strike he throws her to the ground. One of Panora's controlled soldiers falls from above. Langit remains on the ground, preparing to fight. The soldier attacks her, but she manages to defend herself. Raja, the creature controlling Panora, says it is not her fault that the world has become this way. Panora explains that the blame lies with the greed of the elders. Langit, still pinned down, seems to tremble with anger. Nova shouts, warning that the central tank is a mixer. Panora simply watches him, her expression unchanged. Back at the elevator, Dong confirms entry and prepares to fight. He says he heard that something was placed in his blood to neutralize the allergic reaction. Our hero cuts his own finger, releasing blood filled with nanobots. Panora is impressed by Dong's ability to set up such a turnaround. He looks at her expression. Dong realizes that by the look of things, they are doing the right thing. Ingress, above, laughs, ready to put the plan into action. Ingress is surrounded by controlled soldiers. With a single cut, he releases a drop of his own blood. The sprayers outside begin to operate. They release Ingress's blood in the form of gas. One of the controlled soldiers blinks, regaining consciousness. Langit calls her father's name, confused. Ingress asks if Paraka is regaining consciousness. Gradually, the soldiers begin to awaken from mind control. They look around, confused about what is happening. Dong approaches the machine and shouts for Panora to give up. Panora says she never wanted to follow that plan. She continues, saying that now she has no other choice. Dong asks what plan she is talking about. A sleeping Garita opens its eyes, glowing red. Suddenly, several Garitas emerge, ready to attack. Raja asks what plan he wants to know about. The Boomian soldiers look terrified. Several Garitas burst from the ground. One of the soldiers is attacked from behind. A Garita strikes Paraka from the back. Raja reveals that his plan is to kill every Boomian present. Dong asks in shock if she intends to kill everyone. She says those people chose their own safety over the survival of their species. Panora states that it would be better for Dong to join them instead of siding with hypocrites. In a swift motion, Alexia attacks one of the Garitas to protect Langit. During the fight, unfortunately, her weapon falls to the ground. Alert to the situation, Panora notices the danger approaching. From behind, the android charges at another Garita. Even when thrown to the ground, she manages to dodge the next strike. With brutal force, the monster pushes both of them upward. Reacting at the right moment, Alexia lands a precise hit on the Garita. She asks Langit if she is all right, and the girl confirms she is. Dong warns that Panora is heading their way. A soldier falls to the ground. Defeated, Dong retrieves the fallen soldier's weapon. He advances and attacks the Garita with his sword. Dong shouts to Alexia, asking for fire support. The android warns him to move away from the monster. She takes position and fires her powerful weapon. The shot hits the gorilla's eye directly. Dong shouts for Panora to give up as the monster writhes in pain. He approaches but realizes Panora has vanished. Our hero looks around, searching for her. He spots her atop the monster and alerts Alexia. Suddenly, purple energy begins to emanate from the gorilla. Enveloping Dong, Langat shouts for Dong to watch his step. Our hero falls amid the purple energy, but says he is fine. He says he was lucky to fall to the ground, though it will be hard to get up. Dong informs Alexia that Panora is moving outward and that he will track her. The android says she understands and Dong runs toward the exit. He sees Panora standing on the gorilla as it charges into the battlefield. The monster advances against the Boomians, beginning a true massacre. Watching the chaos, Dong remarks that the situation is far from good. On the other side, Alexia reports that they are also fighting gorillas on the upper level. Then she warns that Boomian casualties are severe. Overwhelmed with concern, Ingress calls for Langat. He asks if she is hurt, and she quickly replies that she is fine. Relieved, the scientist exhales deeply and begins pulling a crate containing Paraka. Curious, Langat asks what they are moving. Without hesitation, Ingress shouts that they are weapons, prompting everyone to help push the crate. Seeing its contents, Paraka is surprised. Loudly, he orders the members to grab the weapons at the central stairs. Finally, Ingress asks Langat where Dong Young-soo is. Paraka continues observing the battle from afar. Ingress says they need to provide support for Dong, and Paraka remembers the Earthling. He says they must first clear the fortress before descending. Paraka shouts through the radio, trying to contact his commanders. A soldier reports that the 1st Cavalry commander is dead. Another soldier informs that the 3rd commander, Barda, is in the hangar. Paraka orders Barda to gather his forces and support Dong Young-soo. The soldier confirms, saying he will send the troops immediately. Dong tells Alexia that Panora is on the move. He realizes there is nothing else he can do. Dong throws a smoke grenade to cover the area. Alexia shouts for him to retreat to the central gate. One of the soldiers says they will hold the line. Dong questions the tactic, and the soldier asks if there is a problem. He explains that if they spread out, they will be defeated one by one. The soldier understands that the plan is to concentrate the attack on a single point. From above, Paraka shouts for Barda to follow Dong's orders. He continues, saying that they will provide support at the gate. Barda agrees, saying that he also likes that operation. Dong plants a flag in the ground, assuming command. Alexia warns that it is time to receive the commander's insignia and focus on his role. With the flag in his hands, she compares the situation to the Battle of Gaugamela. According to Alexia, it is now up to him to be the Alexander of that battle. Her analysis continues, drawing direct parallels to the historical conflict. She explains that the balance of forces resembles the clash between Alexander and Darius. In the android's view, the enemy is trying to use numerical superiority to surround them. Finally, Alexia points out that there is a clear weak point in the enemy formation. She explains that the density of the troops is uneven, creating gaps. Alexia concludes that they must attack those vulnerable points to cause a chain collapse. She reinforces that Dong's role is to lead the cavalry in a direct assault on the center. Dong advances on his mount, ready for battle. A giant gorilla faces him, preparing to fight. Barda shouts that he will handle that monster. He charges forward, but the gorilla is faster and strikes him. One of the soldiers prepares a flare and fires it at the gorilla, distracting the monster and saving Barda. Charging without hesitation, Alexia cuts a path through the enemies. Amid the chaos, Dong shouts for the cavalry to turn left. Without stopping, he orders that Panora be captured at the center of the formation. Following his command, the cavalry advances, firing at the gorillas. From a distance, Dong observes the clash, fully focused on strategy. With agility, he manages to climb onto the giant gorilla. From above, he warns that there are traitors nearby and orders everyone to be careful with their shots. Shouting, he informs Barda that he will climb the gorilla to capture Panora. Then he orders that the left flank attack continue without pause. With his mount in motion, Dong charges straight into the fight. In a precise leap, he abandons the bike and lands on the monster's body. Surprised by his sudden arrival, Panora turns around. The attack comes fast, but she dodges easily. She wonders with a smile if her power will work on Dong as well. Panora begins to chant a mantra, trying to control his mind. Dong fights against the influence as she continues to speak. He fires, but the shot is blocked by one of her soldiers. Dong keeps struggling, trying to break free from the mental control. Even under pressure, he resists and stays focused on the battle. Preparing to counter, the hero makes it clear that he will not be controlled so easily. Suddenly, one of Panora's soldiers charges with an electric weapon. With quick reflexes, Dong manages to block the strike. The shot courses through his body, but the fight continues. Gradually, his vision begins to blur. Amid the confusion, Panora's voice echoes, chanting the mantra once again. A memory appears, bringing back Jocelyn during training. Surprised, Dong wonders why she is hesitating to shoot. With strength, he shouts for her to fire without fear. Finally, Jocelyn fires, still showing hesitation. At that moment, Dean appears and asks if he is alright. Shocked, Dong wonders if his friend is really alive. Shouting, Dean tries to wake him from the trance. Suddenly, Barda grabs him firmly and orders him to pull himself together. Regaining consciousness, Dong asks where Panora is. In response, Barda says that she apparently left the battlefield. Confused, Dong asks what Barda is doing. Without hesitation, he explains that it is mental synchronization. Intrigued, the hero wonders why anyone would do that with a Garita. Barda clarifies that Panora was able to control the monsters precisely through that synchronization. Sensing the loss of control, the giant Garita begins thrashing violently. A memory flashes comrades seen as enemies, and Barda confirms it is a common symptom. Doubt arises, questioning whether Dong's species also reacts to pheromones. In silence, Dong remains deep in thought. The idea comes the effect might be linked to the nanobots injected by Panora. As a compliment, Barda explains that Bumians also use nanobots to manipulate pheromones. Still confused, Dong reflects for a few moments until he finally understands the situation. He asks how Barda knows all this, if the information is restricted to the priests. Barda reveals that he learned everything from Paraka, who hides nothing. Dong questions him about the color of his hair, but Barda only stares back. Panora appears, praising Dong's mental strength. The giant Garita finally breaks free from control, ready to attack again. Dong questions her, asking how long she has been playing with them. She says he reminds her of the legendary heroes. Panora asks which companions he saw in his hallucinations. Dong says that she who caused them should already know. She explains that synchronization does not read the mind, it reveals the heart. Ingress shouts that Panora is surrounded. He orders her not to resist and to accept death. Panora asks if they truly intend to kill her. She wonders if there is no way to unite their forces. Dong sees his team members ready to fire. He accuses her of playing games until the very end. Panora says he could live happily seeing his friends and family. Dong shouts that all of that is false. She argues that if his heart is filled with happiness, reality does not matter. Dong holds her, saying that those are all his subordinates. The hostage soldier says he does not care if Dong kills them all. Shocked by the madness, Dong is suddenly attacked without knowing from where. He reflects that some people fight to defend their beliefs, but others like him fight simply because they are good at it. Dong prepares himself, saying that from now on it is time to work. And he faces his enemies, ready for battle. He grabs his weapon and strikes one of the controlled soldiers. Our hero begins shooting at Panora's soldiers. Dong advances, exchanging fire with the enemies. He uses the pillars for cover against the crossfire and the monsters. He keeps firing, pushing forward through the corridor. Our hero dodges enemy shots and manages to land a perfect hit on one of the soldiers. Dong picks up a stone from the ground and uses it to distract another soldier. Dong shoots one of the enemies, who turns to look at the stone. It is the perfect opening, and he charges forward, firing. The shots hit the officer, who falls to the ground. Meanwhile, Panora keeps firing from afar. She praises him, saying that Dong Youngsu never gives up. He hides behind a pillar that is about to collapse. Dong realizes the cover is falling apart and that he needs to climb. He spots one of the enemies on the upper level and prepares to shoot. Dong hides behind another pillar, waiting for the right moment. More enemies appear, ready for battle. Dong attacks, taking down one of the soldiers. Another enemy prepares to fire. Our hero is faster and hits the enemy. He keeps shooting without stopping. The soldier is wounded, but his hand still holds the weapon, ready for one last shot. Fallen, the soldier says that Dong cannot go anywhere. With his final effort, he fires at Dong. Another soldier shoots too, hitting our hero squarely. Dong falls to the ground, wounded but still able to fire. His shot hits the soldier's head. He turns to Panora, who stands atop the Garita. With a precise shot, Dong hits the target, but it is all one of Panora's illusions. The Garita collapses to the ground, defeated by the explosion. Dong hides behind a pillar, catching his breath. He runs across the carcass of the monster, ready for the next strike. Our hero manages to destroy the Garita's core. Panora says she did not want to kill him that way. Dong leaps toward her, ready for the final confrontation. He encounters another enemy in his path. With a swift move, Dong slashes him across the neck. Dong fires, but the soldier steps in front to shield her. Our hero uses his ally's body as a shield, knowing it is only an illusion. Lenga Pilot is also hit by the attack. She falls to the ground. Dong approaches Panora, who is connected to the machine. He stares at her, but she surprises him with another hallucination. He wonders how he can break free from that illusion. The fox-eared girl tells him that the hallucination will fade once the pheromone effect ends. She encourages him not to worry, and to finish the job. Dong says he will let her live if she surrenders. Panora is surprised by his mercy. He explains that he is merely following the Geneva Convention. She says that even if he spares her, the other Boomians would kill her. The fox-eared girl asks him to kill her himself. Dong orders Panora to turn her head and fires. Langut shoots, hitting the Garita directly. Garita says it is over and praises Langut's good work. but the girl says it is not finished yet, they still need to find Dong. Over the radio, Alexia reports that she found Dong and is returning. Langat asks if Dong is alright, and he replies that he has no serious injuries. He continues saying that he killed the enemy commander, Panora. Parita and Langat are shocked by the news. The soldiers celebrate, shouting that they have won the battle. One of them looks at Dong and says that the hero has returned. They keep cheering their victory. Rada's body falls to the ground, lifeless. The soldiers shout that the hero from another planet has freed them. Ingress thanks Dong for fighting for them, and our hero says he only did what needed to be done. Dong announces that he will check the items Panora collected. He walks away saying he needs to rest a bit alone. Langat watches the soldiers, lost in thought. Dong feels as though he has awakened from the same dream as always. He remembers the feeling of freedom he had when he received the mission, but he realizes that even on another planet, the situation remains the same. Dong lets out a sigh of frustration. He concludes that it is a new stage but the same role as always. Dong puts on a record and tells Alexia he does not want to be disturbed. Langat comments that the music he played in the cave was happy, but says that the song playing now is sad. Dong just listens to the music without saying anything. Langat says she thought she would be happy to meet other Boomians, but she did not know they would have to hate and fight each other like this. She comments that although Parita and Ingress said it was inevitable, she feels bad. The girl praises Dong, saying that he is an incredible warrior. He replies that he can stay calm only because it was what he did every day on Earth. Langat says she likes it when Dong Youngsu makes music. Dong reflects, saying he has never seen anyone so cheerful and full of joy. Langat asks him to play for her and teach her how to make music. He agrees, but on the condition that she sings while he plays. The girl smiles but soon starts to cry. Dong hugs her, trying to comfort her. Later he picks up the guitar and says that enough of sad stories. Alexia approaches, worried about the trauma he might have suffered. Dong says he has accepted the death of his friends but admits he is not completely fine. The android asks if he has been keeping his records in Korean the whole time. He explains that at first he did not trust them, which is why he used his own encryption. Alexia asks if it is safe to store the records with her. She says that image logs take up too much space. Dong agrees, thoughtful. He suggests that, like the Voyager's golden record, music would be a more efficient medium. Dong says Langat will sing with the melody, and Alexia finds that a creative form of harmony. He asks if the sound is good, and Heiji shouts for him to come over for a second. Dong complains that Heiji should have brought only the smart ones. The little robot says it does not know what to do with kids who cannot even cook. Dong and Alexia sigh, discouraged by the argument. Meanwhile, Barta and Nova are startled to see a giant tentacle. Alexia explains that if they proceed, information exchange will become possible. Dong asks Alexia to organize the records while he teaches Heiji. The little robot asks if Alexia can suggest an efficient storage method. Alexia suggests creating a virtual machine so they can communicate. Heiji reports that they are recording data about the planet Boomi. Alexia explains that since their computer languages differ, they cannot communicate directly. Heiji compares the idea to mental synchronization between computers. After exchanging glances, Alexia and Heiji agree to try the experiment, believing Ingress will like the idea. With anticipation, Ingress comments that if the experiment works, many systems could be connected. He then says the translation tools are loaded, and asks them to begin data exchange. Without delay, Alexia initiates the connection protocol. Inside the virtual machine, she appears in a humanoid form, drawing attention with her surprisingly beautiful appearance. Observing the environment, the other woman remarks that the space is empty and now needs to be filled. In agreement, Alexia says that this represents only the beginning. Suddenly, Reba's first reaction is a cry of pain. On instinct, Langat grabs him, trying to calm him. Even so, the creature breaks free and runs away. After the incident, Langat comments that somehow killing does not feel like the right choice. She crouches down, thoughtful, feeling that something is not right. Breaking the silence, the other woman says the work is almost finished. Calling Heiji, she says there is something he can help with. Finally, Alexia reveals that she wishes to become human, leaving the woman visibly shocked. She explains that the way humans remember is extremely efficient, and that they use only the memories necessary for each situation. She adds that her words may sound human, but her virtual image resembles Langat. The woman says she understands that Alexia sees herself as an AI modeled after Langat. Alexia asks her to prepare for future missions. She insists that her appearance is truly her own, and naturally she becomes curious as to why she looks so much like Langat. The woman reveals that Langat is her daughter, and that it is a secret. I confess I had already suspected it. Ingress announces that the external work is finished. Dong arrives with food and asks how they are doing. He offers some to Ingress, who thanks him. Dong says he feels much better, thanks to the nanobots. He comments that because of them he has become more sensitive to mental synchronization. Dong asks under what conditions mental synchronization works. Ingress explains that it neutralizes the mind with pheromones and uses electrical signals. He gives as an example the increase in aggression when Boomian's skin turns red. Ingress concludes that in this state an attack command will make them attack the enemies. Dong concludes that the visions of his friends were a command to think of close people. Ingress confirms, saying that with more advanced devices, escaping becomes nearly impossible. Dong says he worries about hallucinating during combat. Ingress shifts uncomfortably, but continues the conversation. He shows a guitar he built himself, modeled after Dong's. Ingress explains that he modified a plasma cutter, so it could be used in combat. Dong is stunned by the gift, unsure what to say. Ingress hands him a pair of headphones, explaining that he can listen through them. Dong thanks him and asks if he can try the guitar. The scientist tells him to go ahead, as he cannot work anymore that day. Excited, Dong thanks him and promises to return the favor. Ingress wonders if Earthlings often drink something so strong. Dong sits outside playing his new guitar. Langet approaches, holding a lantern. He keeps playing, immersed in the music. Langet removes one of Dong's headphones to listen. She asks what song it is. Dong explains that it is a song he made with a friend, and that he suddenly remembered it. Langet says she feels happy and sad at the same time. He says that is exactly the feeling he wanted to create with the music. The scene shifts to a flashback, where a streamer girl praises his melody. She explains that they decided to make a closing song for the live stream. The girl complains when he talks about money before making art. She praises the song, saying it is really good. The streamer suggests the title grand finale for the track. Back in the present, Dong asks if Langet liked it. She says yes, and the two quietly watch the starry sky. A red flower appears amid the codes. The AI representing Langet's mother holds the flower. The android reports that atmospheric composition analysis is now possible. Alexia smells the flower and is suddenly transported to a field full of blossoms. Confused, she asks what just happened. The AI explains that it created something similar to human memory. Alexia asks if one sense evokes another, then answers herself, saying it is not just the senses, but memories and actions together. Alexia concludes that although errors may occur, the method is both original and effective. Langet's mother's AI informs her that the essential download is complete. She continues, saying that Alexia can now assist Dong more effectively. And finally, she asks Alexia to keep Langet safe. Suddenly, Jocelyn appears, ordering them to drop their weapons. Ingress stands up, startled by her arrival. Jocelyn shouts again, demanding that they surrender. Ingress's sword falls to the ground. Other soldiers arrive and ask if the commander is all right. Jocelyn asks who he is. Paraka says he came to negotiate, and that he is a friend of Dong. Jocelyn keeps her weapon aimed, suspicious. Paraka repeats that he is a friend of Dong Young-soo. She tells them to talk in private. Dong tells her to make it quick. The two step aside to talk. Paraka warns that Alexia is arriving for the negotiation. Jocelyn is surprised, asking if Alexia is nearby. Paraka makes a hand signal. Jocelyn does not understand what it means. A drone appears and orders her to stop. Her weapon is deactivated by the drone. She throws two discs into the air, and orders the drone to disable the interference. Jocelyn presses a button on her suit, initiating a radio scan. Paraka asks for a response. Alexia asks her to state her affiliation, rank, and name. Jocelyn introduces herself and celebrates that Alexia is alive. The android says she is glad to know Jocelyn survived. Jocelyn explains that she is stationed at the 4th Orbital Observation Base. She says she found an alien who claims to be a friend of Dong. Alexia explains that it is Barda, a comrade sent to negotiate. Jocelyn asks if the order came from the section chief, and Alexia confirms. She agrees to assist in the negotiation if the order came from Dong. Paraka reports that Jocelyn wants to speak to the commander. Jocelyn says she first needs to know what they want. Paraka reveals that there is a way to destroy the Ragbata meteor. He proposes that they free the synchronized Bumians and join forces. Jocelyn's soldiers are stunned by the proposal. Paraka laughs, confident in his offer. But the commander says Paraka is the one who should be begging for his life. He orders Comrade to be brought in. Paraka mutters that he needs to deal with that fool. The commander orders Paraka to fight the prisoner. He says that if Paraka wins, he will be allowed to speak. Paraka grows furious, shouting at his soldiers. The commander insists the fight must be fair and removes Paraka's armor. He warns that the only rule is to fight until one of them dies. The prisoner prepares for combat, her body flushed red with rage. Jocelyn informs Alexia that the traitors are forcing Barda to fight. Alexia confirms and the two begin to fight. Paraka lands a punch, but Comrade dodges. She counterattacks with a powerful strike. The fight continues, both trading blows and kicks. Paraka notices she is using her left hand again. He manages to grab Comrade's arm, blocking her attack, but it does not work well. As she lands a strong right hook, she rushes forward again, ready to attack. For a moment he freezes. He even asks why she is hesitating, and she tells him to save her. He attacks her, but she dodges easily. With a powerful blow, he throws her to the ground. Jocelyn's soldiers are shocked by the sight. Paraka shouts that enough is enough and demands to see the commander. His sword slips from his hand and falls to the floor, signaling the fight's end. Across the room, the commander orders him to finish the combat. In a cold tone, he warns that if Paraka does not kill her, he will be the one to die. Paralyzed by pressure, Paraka stands frozen, unsure what to do. From afar, Jocelyn watches everything with a serious, calculating expression. On the ground, Kamra trembles, unable to stand. Carefully, Jocelyn asks Alexia if things will get worse if Barda dies. Then she comments that she heard the guest has valuable information and suggests a peaceful solution. Impatient, the commander orders Jocelyn not to interfere in their affairs. He warns her that she will not receive the same special treatment given to Raja. Around them, soldiers begin taking positions, preparing to open fire. Jocelyn then asks Alexia what Dong's rules of engagement are. Moments later, she releases her drones and declares that she already understands the situation. Intrigued, the commander asks what she thinks she is doing. Without hesitation, Jocelyn announces that she is opening the plasma. Quickly, the drones attack the soldiers' weapons. One of them looks around, completely confused by what just happened. With a firm voice, Jocelyn declares that negotiations have failed and that the combat sequence has begun. The internal system confirms that the heating process is complete. Advancing without fear, she activates her plasma discs. In an authoritative tone, Jocelyn declares that resistance is futile and demands to be taken to the commander. Surprised, the commander asks if she has any idea who he is. At that moment, Jocelyn begins to hear a strange sound. She turns around and sees several soldiers lying on the ground. The soldiers are being controlled, their skin glowing red with rage. Kamra says she has an idea where the commander is. She orders Jocelyn to follow her, and warns that he is on the upper floor. Jocelyn reports to Alexia that the Boomians are attacking. She hesitates, asking whether to kill or spare them, and Alexia tells her to try. Kamra charges forward, taking down soldiers one after another. She keeps fighting, clearing the way. A soldier with a sword attacks her. He prepares to strike before he can act. Jocelyn hits him with her plasma disc. Stunned, the soldier freezes, unable to understand what just happened. Paraka shouts for Kalra to get back immediately. Across the area, Panora's soldiers begin firing. Jocelyn uses her discs as shields. With precise movements, she dodges the incoming shots. Panicked, Kalra asks whether to go left or right, and Paraka yells, "Right." One of the soldiers advances, ready to shoot at point-blank range. Without hesitation, Jocelyn activates her shield to block the attack. Then she charges forward, striking down the enemies one after another. In the chaos, she wonders what the giant gorilla standing before her is. Jocelyn is shocked by the monster's size. Paraka yells to the commander, demanding they talk. He proposes freeing the Boomians and doing what is right together. The commander looks surprised but remains silent. The giant gorilla attacks Paraka. Jocelyn launches her plasma discs to assist. Her discs slice through the gorilla's tentacles. The monster recoils in pain and collapses to the ground, defeated. Dong orders the soldiers to stand down. A gas is released, calming everyone. The soldiers look around, confused, unsure of what just happened. Dong announces that they have found a way to destroy the meteor. He says that if they fight together, they can protect their planet. One soldier asks if that is really possible. Dong reveals that his species possesses an antimatter bomb. He explains that to use the bomb, they will need everyone's strength. A soldier steps forward, saying that if that is the case, he wants to join. Dong agrees and tells him to gather his comrades. Jocelyn is stunned when she sees the section chief. Dong greets her and asks for a mission report. Jocelyn jokes that a rock star like him never dies easily. Ingris points out that Dong is without his helmet. Jocelyn reports that she subdued the enemy commander with minimal losses. Dong explains that he is searching for the Atalante's engine. He continues, saying that a massive meteor is approaching the planet, and that they are securing control points to observe the surface with satellites. Jocelyn is surprised, saying that the engine is not on the ground. She reveals that it never fell, it is orbiting the planet. Her confirmation shocks Dong. He asks if the engine is floating like a satellite. Jocelyn replies that the engine is in the sky, above planet Boomi. She explains that she confirmed this from the observation basis. Dong asks why she was looking for the engine. Then comes the revelation Dean planned to use it as a power plant. Stunned, Dong wonders if Dean is still alive. Without hesitation, Jocelyn confirms that he survived and now leads 10 survivors. Then comes the question of whether Raja might assist them. Firmly, Jocelyn explains that if Dong's group is hostile to Raja, they will need to ally with him. In response, Dong says Raja is not someone easily trusted. He adds that Raja's behavior seems to hide a darker purpose. Agreeing, Jocelyn says she also feels something is being concealed. Alexia interrupts, reporting that 12 people have been selected for disobedience. Curious, Dong asks how the prisoners have been treated so far. Concerned, Jocelyn warns that if they return, their allies will be in danger. Ingrid suggests an extreme solution: kill or detain the prisoners. After some thought, Dong decides to keep them confined for now. He explains that the uncooperative ones will go with them, promising to release them later. Intrigued, Ingrid asks what made him change his mind. Dong reveals that more crew members from Earth are on their way. Without objection, Ingrid remarks that Dong seems too kind to the traitors. Then he orders Langet to find something to tie the prisoners with. Angrily, the commander protests, saying this was not part of their agreement. Accusingly, he demands to know if Dong's kind always break their word so easily. Shouting, Kalra demands that the prisoners be freed. In the ensuing chaos, one of the soldiers reaches for a weapon. Alarmed, the commander yells that the traitor is armed and orders him disarmed. Without hesitation, Kalra charges forward to strike. A powerful punch lands squarely on the soldier. The fight rages on, Kalra showing her full strength. Between blows, she calls the enemy a slave bastard and throws him to the ground. Without pause, she locks him in an arm hold to immobilize him, then lands a knee directly to his face. With a final kick, the soldier is knocked unconscious. Kalra takes the fallen enemy's sword. Watching the scene, Jocelyn asks if everyone plans to just stand and watch. On alert, she warns that the prisoners are a risk factor. A soldier retorts that if they die, it will just look like madness. At that, Dong asks Jocelyn for her shield. He shouts for her to hurry. Without arguing, Jocelyn agrees to hand over the shield. Sword in hand, Kalra charges again, ready to strike. In a swift motion, Jocelyn steps forward and blocks the attack. Firmly, she orders Kalra to calm down. Seeking answers, she asks who Kalra really is. Approaching her, Dong asks why she is doing this. Kalra introduces herself and requests to be sent to Raja. In response, Dong asks what she stands to gain from it. Without hesitation, she reveals that her own sister ended up on the 8th path because of a mistake she made. With a desperate cry, Kalra begs them to kill Raja and save her sister. Carefully, Dong says he will come up with a plan and orders her to lower her weapon. The sword slowly lowers and Kalra accepts the proposed truce. From a distance, Jocelyn watches the entire scene, deep in thought. Meanwhile, Langet prepares to shoot, still gripped by distrust. In the air, Jocelyn senses the tension that refuses to fade. Determined, Kalra steps closer, ready to negotiate. In reaction, Langet turns, keeping her weapon steady in her hands. A sigh escapes Jocelyn, heavy with concern. Taking the lead, Dong asks Ingrid to handle the situation. Then he turns to Jocelyn and suggests that they plan the team's return. After a brief hesitation, Jocelyn agrees. Thoughts continue to swirl in Dong's mind. Breaking the silence, Jocelyn remarks that he seems deeply attached to that species. Stepping closer, she asks the section chief for a promise. With firm resolve, Jocelyn demands that if he ever has to choose, he must prioritize the crew members. For a moment, Dong remains silent, offering no reply. Then he answers that it should be obvious, but questions the reason for the conversation. Gently, Jocelyn reminds him that his life also matters and that he must never sacrifice himself. Continuing, she insists that even if that child's life is at stake, he must still protect his own. Dong looks at her, thoughtful, and finally nods in agreement. And that's how we wrap up another part of this incredible story. If you want to keep following it, don't forget to subscribe, leave a like, and drop a comment to support the channel. It costs nothing and helps us a lot. That said, see you later, everyone.